It's Sunday, March the 1st, 2026. Welcome to another episode of 90 Minutes Africa. My name is Rodolphe Okonkwo.
هر چقدر دوست دارید امروز آقا جون
We launched Operation Roaring Lion, an operation against the Iranian terrorist regime in full cooperation with the U.S. Armed Forces. This is an operation against the world's largest sponsor of terror, a regime that for years has called death to Israel, death to America, death to the West. We listened to their words carefully. We watched their actions, and today we acted. We acted because we had to. We launched this operation by seizing an operational opportunity, conducting coordinated strikes against high-level gatherings of senior figures within Iran's military and security leadership. We can now confirm that these senior Iranian regime officials were eliminated by the IDF. Ali Shamkhani, advisor to Khamenei on issues of defense and Secretary of the Defense Council. Muhammad Pakpoul, commander of the IRGC. Muhammad Shirazi, head of the military bureau of the Iranian supreme leader for almost 40 years. Salah Asadi, the senior intelligence officer of the Supreme Command. Aziz Nasirzadeh, the Iranian defense minister, and others. These and other senior figures will no longer be able to advance their plan, the destruction of Israel. These are terrorists who have blood on their hands, who are directly responsible for the death of thousands by terror. The launch of Operation Roaring Lion comes after months of close and joint planning with the U.S. Armed Forces. A historic, unprecedented level of cooperation between two nations fighting side by side against terror. Our mission could not be more clear. The IDF will continue to act to remove emerging threats against Israel because the price of inaction is too high.
Its military is undertaking a massive and ongoing operation to prevent this very wicked, radical dictatorship from threatening America and our core national security interests. The lives of courageous American heroes may be lost, and we may have casualties. That often happens in war. But we're doing this not for now. We're doing this for the future. To the members of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard, the armed forces, and all of the police, I say tonight that you must lay down your weapons and have complete immunity, or, in the alternative, face certain death. Finally, to the great, proud people of Iran, I say tonight that the hour of your freedom is at hand. Stay sheltered. Don't leave your home. It's very dangerous outside. Bombs will be dropping everywhere. when we are finished, take over your government. It will be yours to take. This will be probably your only chance for generations. For many years, you have asked for America's help, but you never got it. No president was willing to do what I am willing to do tonight. Now you have a president who is giving you what you want. So let's see how you respond.
The world that most of us left behind to go to bed on Friday is not the world that we see today. Today on 90 Minutes Africa, to have a conversation with a special guest. Most of you may know him in the 90s, was an activist and a lawyer and someone that led students and several institutions during that period. Let me show you a brief introduction of our guest today, who will join us to discuss the situation of the world, Nigeria, and more importantly, the life and times of Biodun Jeyifo. So let's watch.
From Abuja, precisely. I'm glad to be here, and thank you for putting this panel together. It's hard to find one specific place to start from when talking about Professor Biodun Jeyifo. He was a Renaissance man, a man of so many parts, whose abilities
All right. We have a technical problem here. Let me just, without wasting much of our time. Can you see me? Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
All right, sorry about that. We had technical issues. I had an introduction recorded that it's not playing for whatever reason. Thank you so much for being here. For those who do not know, Ogaga has a PhD from Cornell University and an MFA from the same university. In 1997, Ogaga traveled to Edinburgh to be part of activists who were at the protests. They wanted to attend the heads of governments of Commonwealth. And when he protested and demanded there should be sanctions against the government of Sani Abacha, on returning to Nigeria, he was picked up and kept arrested and kept locked up for more than a year. He's a poet, a professor. After getting his PhD, he became a professor at Texas State University. And then in 2014, Ogaga went back to Nigeria to go and make a change. He's been there till now. Now he's a partner at the Remedium law firm in Abuja. Ogaga, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
It's good to have you. You disappeared for most of your friends in America. One day you disappeared on us, and we saw you next in Nigeria. We'll get to that, but first of all, let me get your view on the world today. Most of us went to bed on Friday and woke up to a different world, quite different from what we anticipated. Now there are crises all over the Middle East, and what is your first reaction to what Israel and America did in Iran?
Well, first and foremost, talking about disappearance, you said we'll get back to that, but should just quickly say, in this day and age, there can be no disappearing. You can track anybody anywhere. We have our signature on the internet. Once you have an address, once you've ever watched any algorithm, structured social media, platform, then you are everywhere. But seriously speaking, yes, you're right. We went to bed on Friday, and when we woke up, it was a new world. The Greek philosopher, I think it's Heraclitus, famously said that you cannot step in the same river, twice. Obviously, because the waters are constantly flowing, so you are stepping into a new body of waters. And it seems the way things are moving, especially with President Donald Trump of America, the way he seems to wake up every second, he has something else doing, and focusing the attention of the world on whatever his ego, beckons him to do. We cannot go to bed, and wake up in the same world, on the same bed, twice. When we go to bed, it's one world, and when we wake up, it's another world. But I suppose that's also the nature of the world. I'm a little bit concerned. I think these are very momentous events. And my concern is not because I have any love whatsoever for the Ayatollah Khamenei and the fundamentalist Islamic regime in Iran. Far from it, if for no other reason anyway, for what that same regime has tried to do to the world of secular knowledge, of writing and literature, in which I am a participant and very much invested. When it pronounced a fatwa on Salman Rushdie on the publication of the Satanic Verses, for that singular act of wanting to put a permanent curl on freedom of thought, on the intellect, I have every reason to hate, or at least to dislike, the Islamic revolutionary government of Iran. But I do not want to also fall victim to the great propaganda that surrounds everything that comes from Iran and that pertains to the whole Muslim, Christian, Western, Oriental, conflict. Those are big, complex issues we can try to unpack one by one. But my immediate concern and worry is that when we have such bloody dictators like Ayatollah Khamenei, it gives the opportunity for tyrants, dictators, would-be dictators at any rate, like Donald Trump, to launder their image, to appear to be heroes who want to save democracy and the free world. Whereas everything that Donald Trump has stood for, even before he ran for and became president, everything about him shows that he's a racist, he's a misogynist, he's a psychopath, he's someone who wants to be a dictator that has no respect for the constitutional checks and balances of the great American democratic experiment. We don't have to look far to find evidence. But now he has gone to Iran in collaboration with the government, the right-wing, the extreme right-wing government of Israel that is currently perpetuating a genocide against the Palestinian people to attack a country which at the moment of the attack had not posed any threat whatsoever to America. At least if there was any threat, it is not anyone that the President Trump, had disclosed to the American people, had gone to Congress to tell them about, and then to also indicate his plan of action to safeguard the interests, the security, and well-being of Americans and of America. So this is a war of choice, conveniently chosen, some might even say, to distract attention from his mounting problems at home. Particularly, he's been from his toe neck deep in the Jeffrey Epstein, scandal of pedophiles and child traffickers, girl traffickers. Distract attention from that. Distract attention from the rising cost of living in America because of his ill thought out, tariff regime. Every problem he has at home, basically, to distract attention from it. He has tried earlier on to distract attention by some kind of crazy idea of taking over Greenland which is part of a NATO, part of Denmark, which is part of NATO. So to me, the greatest worry is that this is going to give a chance to Trump to launder his image. But whether or not that's going to be a successful laundering of his image, we will see. Because history is you might just declare a war of choice. How that war unfolds, how it will end, no one can know exactly. It might even win what I might call immediate victory, but I don't think that might be the end of it. 5 years hence, 1 year hence, 10 years hence, history has a way of remembering those wrongs that have not been addressed. And I just pray that our world may not have just been launched onto an irreversible course of catastrophe, disturbances, the whole Middle East burning, and attacks and counterattacks. I just hope that that is not what Donald Trump has brought our world to. Far from being a custodian of the peace and order of the world, even if it is to guarantee the interest of the Western world at the expense of the non-Western world, at least there was some kind of peace that we could live with. But is this necessarily going to bring us to a more peaceful, more prosperous world? I'm not quite sure yet. And I think in the next few days, maybe the next few weeks, we will see how things unfold. But I'm very, very worried about the possibility of Trump using this to make himself into a hero of democracy and the free world.
Thank you so much for that. There are some of the things you said that you can find in what democratic lawmakers have already said about the situation. They called it a war of choice. They called it, they worry about the outcome. What will be the outcome? But on the other side, the people at the other end are talking about people celebrating in Tehran, people celebrating in other parts of, even in America, Iranians in exile. They're happy about the outcome and that they are looking forward to a different Iran. What is the reaction in Nigeria where you are in Abuja? Are people reacting in a particular way?
I would be shocked if people came into the streets, as a matter of fact. But about people rejoicing, I'm going to say that should never be the only measure of justification or the only basis for justifying a thing as serious, as calamitous as a war. You and I know, because of the history of military dictatorships on our continent and in our country, Nigeria, that anytime there was a coup broadcast, people would come into the streets and rejoice. But that doesn't mean that they were happy about dictatorship. What they were happy about is that the regime, the government of the day, that had not been meeting their interests, had not been concerned about their welfare, that had been riddled with corruption, mismanagement, is finally, in a way, being punished. In fact, they see it as punishment. It's the government being punished. So they are rejoicing at that instance for that regime coming to, as it were, a kind of poetic justice, something that they cannot themselves do. So if it takes soldiers to stage a coup and in fact set us back, destroy democracy, they will rejoice for the instant the punishment that the uncaring, corrupt regime is being made, to suffer. And as you know, sooner than later, there will be another coup. And then again, they will rejoice until it got to a point when they began to realize that, no, this is a pattern. Our rejoicing has nothing to do with whether we're going to have democracy going forward. So I'm sure that if there's a coup today, there will be some people who will rejoice. Recently, you've seen an upsurge of it in Burkina Faso, in Guinea, in Niger, and yes, ECOWAS, tried to intervene, but in the end, it became too complicated, and they let things be in order not to cause too much instability in the region, hoping that reason will prevail. But what I'm saying is that whether or not people are rejoicing in Tehran, whether or not people, Iranian exiles in America, in the West, the UK, wherever they are, in the rest of the world are rejoicing, is not the issue at the moment. It is whether a Trump collaborating with the extreme right-wing government of Netanyahu of Israel, a state that we know at the moment as we speak is actively carrying out genocide against the Palestinian people, is necessarily the agent of democracy, change, peace, and the rule of law in the world. And if we cannot answer yes, then we have to be very careful. We have to be wary. We know, for instance, that Trump is for the oligarchs, is for the plutocrats. It's not for the ordinary. He uses religion. He's not even a Christian. He uses religion and whatever else he can do as a populist to pander to special interest, to advance his goals, which is to be a government in the first instance for billionaires, plutocrats, and to pander towards dictators, autocrats. You see how well he's more or less been making the case for Vladimir Putin in the war that Vladimir Putin, another war of choice, chose to wage against Ukraine, a sovereign nation, who he does not want to have his choice of friends and enemies. So the danger here is that because the regime that is seeking to topple and the leading figures of the Islamic revolutionary government that they have taken out, America and Israel have taken out, are indeed hated figures. They are indeed, vilified figures that we cannot love because they stand for clerical governance, they stand for dictatorship, repression. Therefore, that opportunistic moment of coming in to topple them carries with it the danger of legitimizing the kind of autocracy that Trump himself represents for the world and especially for America.
So the government of Nigeria reacted by calling for restrained dialogue, which is not different from what the Russians, the government of Putin said, or that of China. Now, people have said that the world order has changed, shifted, and it's a different structure now. How do you see it for countries in Africa?
We must be very worried. We are now back to the epoch of might is right, gunboat diplomacy. In those days, it was called gunboat diplomacy, representing the superiority of arms of the invaders. Now, of course, by gunboat diplomacy, we mean the country that has the most lethal arsenals, bunker busters, what they have done, the kind of intelligence that can locate where you are, where people are meeting, sitting in their room, in whatever hall, and take them out one by one. That's extreme superiority of technological know-how in warfare. That superiority, that might, is what America and Israel are deploying to damn any moral consideration. Might is right. As long as they can go in and win on their terms, then they are right. They can then rewrite history. They can then try to make all of us not to see, blindfold us to the original intent, the context in which they are asking, in which they are acting, what they are seeking to protect, and the world order they are advancing, which is to say, we have might, therefore we are right. Whatever we do is right. It doesn't matter what international law says. It doesn't matter what the norms of international law are. The United Nations is nothing to them. As a matter of fact, they are actively, at least Donald Trump, is actively trying to supplant the United Nations to what he calls a board of peace. What kind of peace is this? If we cannot respect the sovereignty of nations and through diplomacy try to resolve conflicts and through adhering to the right thing, because all of this can be easily, resolved. The Middle East problem is inseparable from the Palestinian question. And the Palestinian question is as clear as daylight. A two-state solution. The same United Nations that partitioned the land for Israel and Palestine is the same United Nations that Israel and America do not respect. The United Nations is scorned, preferring to go unilaterally, use their superiority of arms to achieve their aims. I don't think that can be a world order that anyone who has the faintest respect for the rule of law, for democracy, for the right of people to self-determination can be happy about. And now we're on the cusp of what might very well be, if not a world war, then most certainly an even more unstable and dangerous Middle East, which means an even more unstable and dangerous world.
So for a young kid now in college or in high school, listening to you, the kid will hear you condemn America, condemn Russia, condemn America for what America and Israel is doing in the Middle East, condemn Russia for what Russia is doing in Ukraine. What is the solution for middle power nations or poor nations that are not powerful? Where do they run to? What is the ideal? Where should the world go to? Who is right?
I have to make a clarification. If you notice, I've been saying President Trump and the oligarchs and the plutocrats that he represents. I've not said America. In fact, I even said earlier that the great experiment in separation of powers, in secular governance, and democracy that the American government represents is what Trump is destroying. So I'm not condemning America. In fact, we have so much to love in America. And in fact, the pain of the likes of us is that very great thing that America represents, despite its history, despite its coming to be, and the things that are not so ennobling that happened. Let's not mince words. Despite, again, its own time, the genocide and the slavery that are the very roots, the foundation of America, it somehow managed to give to the world the idea that all human beings are created equal. Although in the language of the time, it said all men are created equal, which for the time is such an ennobling and liberating idea, to wage so many revolutions and struggles for the emancipation of human beings and to expand the liberties of those who already had them. So it is not America that I'm condemning, but the specific order of government that Donald Trump represents. When George Bush had to go to war with Iraq, whatever flaws you might be able to come up with, whatever criticisms you might be able to bring forth about that war, that it was not justified, still, he mobilized the rest of the world. They presented a case, an argument. So yes, maybe at the end of the day, weapons of mass destruction were not found. But at least he made a case to the people, to the American people and to the world as to why they had to go on that war, to wage that war. We haven't seen that yet. What if, for instance, after 9/11, again, Bush Jr., president again, when he had to invade, go to war, get Afghanistan, and try to bring down the Islamic, what they call the war against terror, after the 9/11, events. Again, he made the case. Now, we may not all agree, but at least he made the case and tried to mobilize the rest of the world. And the rest of the world also went with them. In Afghanistan, the rest of the world was fighting with America against Islamic terrorism. But now, who other than Israel is on the side of America? No other country. So we have to be very clear that it is not America that we are condemning. It's not even Israel as a people, or at least the Jewish people that we are condemning. We're talking about its governments. The governments that lead them, that are at the head of a specific ideology of governing the world, having their way, irrespective of any notions or norms of international law and norms of international order. These are the people we.
Okay, I got the point. When I said America, I meant the government. But let's say we are talking about the way you're presenting it. So the American government is not doing the right thing. The Russian government is not doing the right thing. Israeli government is not doing the right thing. Who is doing the right thing? Where do we run to? I mean, the Nigerian government, are they doing the right thing?
As a matter of fact, the so-called refugees in Israel. They are Jews against occupation. They are doing the right thing. When the protests were on in America, even on the campuses, Colombia and all, there were Jews among them who were saying, not in our name. The trouble we have is that the world is being led increasingly in favor of ideas and what is right, no longer having any power of suasion, where shamelessness, the sheer bravado, the sheer effrontery, the sheer shock and awe that the new right-wing governments have adopted, even down to their language of everyday speech, be as racist as you can be as misogynist as you can be as offensive as you can be, respect no norms. That has so shifted us away from the idea that the proper thing, the right thing to do, morality, the sense of that's a dishonorable thing to do, has so shifted us away from it that we can only now dictate, if at all, the degree of shamelessness. And even then, be helpless. Because while we are debating that, one atrocity or the other is happening. Either citizens are being shot in the streets of Minneapolis because supposedly the government is out to get every illegal alien, and it doesn't matter whether a citizen has been killed or not. Since when did an American government feel that it didn't matter if you killed a citizen on American soil? Supposedly because you are out to do the right thing by way of removing illegal aliens. So this is how far we have been taken. So it's become almost as if truth, the facts, honor, morality have been so disempowered that only those who have the right, who are armed and can do whatever they want and get away with it, are the ones who control our discussions. So to the secondary school students, high school students who are listening to this, I don't know how much civics, how much history, given the war against curriculum that is going on in the US, they are being taught. But if they listen to their parents, and again, it depends on, this is a great polarization that has taken place, where it's no longer possible to say, this is the truth. It's like everybody have their individual or group truths. So we can't have that one, agree on that one concept or notion or set of facts that we say is the truth. But whatever the case may be, we have to hope that those high school students at least know enough of the history of their country, know enough about what a democracy means, even if it's just to go by the famous Abraham Lincoln definition of government of the people, by the people, for the people, and then be able to ask whether the government of today, at least with respect to this war that it has launched against Iran, has done that on behalf of the people, for the people, and was done by the people, in the sense that Congress authorized the president to go to war against an enemy country. In which case, we also know what specific danger threatening the existence, the security of America that government posed at the time when the president went to war. So I guess I'm saying the space for civic participation, the space for civilized discussion to arrive at the consensus as much as possible of what is right and what should be done has been so shrunk, has been so displaced that it's almost impossible to have a conversation. And in that moment, in that space, in this particular conjunction, when we can no longer do that in a way that is reasonable, where we can find common ground, however tentative, government just does what it wants. Before we are done responding to that outrage, another thing is done. And so it's one thing after the other to keep the people so distracted, so engaged that they cannot focus on what matters most, which is this what American democracy is? Is this the way America wants democracy to be practiced in the rest of the world? That if a nation is powerful enough, it should just invade another country. It's done it in Venezuela, as you know, went to Venezuela, captured the president and his wife, brought them to his own country to try, and declared openly that they were taking over the oil, the wealth, the natural resources of that country. Is that the world we want? That when a nation is powerful enough, it can go to another country, capture its leaders, take over its resources. That is good old colonialism. What has changed? So is that what the American high school students think should be the way that the world that they are growing into, that they should be governed? I think these are the issues.
Mm. So is it right to say that you lean towards the left, or is it towards the right?
Towards the truth.
Are you in the middle?
Towards the truth.
Towards the truth. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So during the Cold War, we had the Warsaw Pact, we had the NATO group, and then we had the non-aligned movement. What is the structure you think that the world needs today to be able to navigate these two sides, where you have the Russians misbehaving, the Russian government misbehaving in your own terms, and the leader of the Democratic wing, the American government, misbehaving? Where will the rest of the world who are looking for something close to the ideal governance go to? How would they ally themselves? Where would they begin? Because you're talking about Trump trying to be a dictator. At the same time, the way the American democracy is working now is giving hope to people like Museveni, people like Tinubu of Nigeria, that they can do whatever they want to do because it's happening in the United States. So where should the world go to?
Well, that's what I ended by saying, those high school students you invoked, what world would they want to grow into? Is this the kind of world they want to grow into? So you just enlarge it to say it over the rest of the world. Like we're saying the same thing. I don't know that it is necessarily a question of having a tripartite world, which is non-aligned nations as kind of the in-between arbiters, between the West and the East, between the so-called liberal democratic world and the so-called socialist communist world and the non-aligned in between. I don't think so. You asked me earlier, do I lean to the left or the right? And I said, no, to the truth. I just want our world to go back to dealing with facts, not alternative reality, as the new right-wing government want us, to believe that there's something called alternative facts. Yes, okay, there may be alternative facts. To every question, there are two sides, or probably more. As a lawyer, one of the cardinal maxims of law is that you must hear the other side. In other words, in every dispute, in every contest, there are two sides, and probably even more. There are times when parties who have not been sued can bring motion to join an action because their interests are involved, or you cannot successfully adjudicate, resolve the issues at stake without bringing in a third party. So, yes, all sides, there are more than two sides sometimes, but we need facts. We need to at least respect the sanctity of facts. Like it's famously said, we can all have our opinions, but we can't make up our own facts. If we are at least referring to the same set of facts and coming to differing conclusions, it means that the possibility of our coming to some kind of agreement regarding the facts, and therefore some kind of agreement regarding what is to be done exists. But if right from the beginning, we deny the facts, even though they are there bold, how then can we even come to any sense of communal action? Whereas, as human beings, what defines us most is our sociality, the fact that we are in society. Once we came from the jungle and into society, we necessarily have to have some norms, some rules, some articles of association that govern our being together. If we don't agree on those articles of association, if we don't agree on the fact of our coming together, and therefore the necessity for us to agree on certain norms that will govern our behavior, then how can we coexist peacefully? This is where we are. Now, to bring this home, if it cannot be agreed that Rene Good was not a terrorist, was not trying to kill an ICE official from the videos we've seen, and yet that's the government saying that, even branding her a domestic terrorist. So how do we move from there? How are you going to make the government to see that it needs to do right? So this is the bind where we are. And I think it's the most dangerous thing any civilized society can have. The idea of the polity or the police is supposed to be the idea of a civic space in which we, through reasoned discussion, can come to a sense of what is good, the common good, the one that what we benefit the majority of the people, and act accordingly. But if that space has been taken away, how can we? Now, non-aligned? No, we have to be aligned. But what we are going to be aligned to is not so much the ideological, but the truth. Because the truth knows no ideology at the end of the day. After all, both sides lay claim to it. Both sides lay claim to it. So the truth knows no ideology. If somebody was murdered, that person was murdered. There's nothing ideological about it. The only thing that we need to do is the facts surrounding that murder. And once we establish them, we'll do the necessary thing. Corrective, justice to the murdered, and then justice to society, which is most harmed by it.
All right. We've done 40 minutes and we have not even started. We've not even gotten to Nigeria, to literature, which is why we brought you here about Biodun. But let's go home to Nigeria. And there will be an election coming up. It's heating up already. If you had won the election that you participated in, you will have been representing Isoko Federal Constituency today in the National Assembly, but you didn't win. We get to why you didn't win. But let me ask you, looking at the National Assembly, just you will have been there, and what they did with the electoral reform bill. What do you think is going on there? Are they the people in those buildings? Are they the people that will lead Nigeria to where we desire to be?
Shall I answer this? First of all, if you ask me, the kind of democracy, liberal, bourgeois democratic practice is bound to give us parliaments and parliamentarians who we are always going to be dissatisfied with anywhere, not only in Nigeria. You can see what is going on in America. The Great Congress of America. You can see what is going on there. You can see people coming out to defend Donald Trump openly. But when nobody's listening, they say all kinds of things about him. We don't even have to go far. Even his own vice president once described liking him to Hitler. The senator from South Carolina, Lindsey Graham, has said the most vile things about him. The current Secretary of State, the same thing. And can go on and on. They've all disparaged him. They've all abused him. They've all called him out for what he is. But they are the greatest champions, at least when they had a mic in front of them today. And they are the ones standing against some of the more progressive bills before the House that could be passed to make life at least a little more tolerable for the American people, because they must subscribe to the agenda of Donald Trump, which is a MAGA agenda. Now, so the same thing here in Nigeria. Do we have the people in our parliament that we would ordinarily have? The answer, of course, maybe most of the time, no. But that is not the option that the bourgeois democratic form of democracy gives us. And the reason is, the first reason is that it is so money-driven. So money-driven that those who mean well often do not have the best public servants, often do not have the means to even compete. You said we'll get to it later. We might as well get to it now. I couldn't even win my primary simply because the people would tell me, say, Ogaga, we know you. Your opponents or your would-be opponents cannot even come close to you. Is it by way of education? Is it by way of struggle for democracy? Is it by way of what you've done? But, sorry, you don't have money. This is at the grassroots level. This is at the ward level, at the unit level, where you're meeting the people on the ground. But you don't have money. Now, are those people bad? Are they money lovers? No. It's just that is the system. That is the way it works. They know that the way the system is, I couldn't possibly go far without money. And they were right. Let me tell you what happened. My would-be opponent, who had been in the House of Representatives for 16 years and was seeking to go for another term of 4 years, so he will be there for 20 years, simply found somebody to run against me in the primaries. Funded him, person won the primary, got a ticket. Then I came back to the US. And then the person disappeared. That was the plan. Once he had snatched the ticket, he would disappear. So that, in essence, my opponent will run unopposed. So the party calls me, say, come back. The person who won the ticket, we can't find him. We're going to use the means available to substitute your name on the ballot. I charged my credit card, came back foolishly, and it never happened. Of course, all of that. And then in 2021, the party asked me to go and run for a House of Assembly seat in Delta to fill a vacant seat. The person who was on that seat died, and I was supposed to it was what do you call it now? A by-election to fill the seat. And the party calls it, this is right in your area, this is your ward, this is your ward now in the House of Assembly. So, and the person who was there came from my hometown. So, in fact, they begged me, and I said, look, I don't have money. He said, don't worry, we just need you to run. We don't need, just agree. And when the party in power in my state saw what was at stake, they threw the coffers of the states open, and I didn't win.
To stop you from winning?
I did run, but in the end, we were spent, we were gone, because all the resources of the state were not made available for that race.
So you are people, just like the people of Nigeria, they vote based on what they could receive from the candidate. Is that
that's entirely another thing that we have to also look at, because this whole system breeds its own corruption of the minds and even the expectations of the people. They now see it as a game. There are those who will tell you, now that it's election time, you will come and talk to us. But after we vote for you, we won't see you again. And then when you also look at it, the lifestyle that the people who then get to political offices live, what they were before they got to the position, and what they become after, is enough to breed that kind of cynicism in the people. Either they will refuse to participate at all, or when they participate, they want some kind of gratification now because they're not going to see you again until 4 years. All right? So, yes, the vote buying, all the machinations, all the things that go on, they are all a product of the system, which is why I started by saying it is a product of the system, which is the bourgeois democratic system, which is driven primarily by money. It was not always like this, mind you. And again, there are still among them people who want to vote right, but they can't have the right candidates to vote for. Or when they have them, they know that they are in a fringe party that will go nowhere. It is something akin to the Ralph Nader movement in America, and which in the end, Democrats are blaming for denying them, the presidency and making Al Gore to lose. You know what I'm talking about. So people will now calculate as, okay, if we vote for Ogaga, who is from a fringe party and can never make it, we are wasting that vote. So it becomes a question of which devil do we cast our vote for? And it's not the fault, per se, of the people who are coming out. It's the fault of the system that makes it possible for only those types, at least for most times, for the majority of the time.
So don't you think it's also the fault of public intellectuals like you, who could not convince the people that this is the right thing to do?
No, they are convinced. They know the right thing. And like I told you, that they would tell me that your opponent cannot even touch you, but you don't have money. So the way to change it, really.
But hold on, before you talk about how to change it, how did someone like Peter Obi do something like that? He went to a party that was not of any importance.
Peter Obi is not a nobody. We are talking at the level of Peter Obi was a former governor. Peter Obi is a captain of industry, owns banks, owns breweries, owns supermarkets. And that's not the same level. It doesn't mean that all moneyed people are in the same party. No, they're not all in the same party. And Peter Obi was not a Labour Party. Yeah, we have won the toga of Labour Party, but he's not a Labour person. You know that. You and I know that. I wrote a piece at that time that it's not so much about the productive economy, but the perception of incorruptibility. That is his calling card. That was the one thing. And Nigerians were so sick and tired, up to their gills with corruption, massive systemic corruption, that anybody who came out and seemed to exemplify it by way of his lifestyle, by way of I won't give shishi, they felt of the number of people available, that is the one to go for. But I wrote an article about it, examining it more critically. So what I'm saying is that it is like all social, I always go back to Chinua Achebe, who said social change is so slow and painful. So slow and painful that when you are packing it drains you even. But bottom line is that if we're going to compete in this bourgeois democratic system, we must have the means to match those who are already in power, those who control the levers of government and levers of industry and are highly invested in the outcomes of election. We must have the means at least to match them reasonably. Maybe not kobo for kobo, naira for naira, but at least for every naira to be able to match them, at least maybe 50 kobo to a naira or 70 kobo to a naira if we are to compete. But when you don't have that at all your ideas, brilliant ideas, will go nowhere. At one point, Gani was a household name. You know that? Gani was a household name. There was hardly any home in Nigeria where that you had not heard of the name Gani. At least literate. Let me just put it that way. He ran under the National Conscience Party to rule this country. How far did he get? I can read out a slew of names of people in the thick and thin of the struggle for good governance in Nigeria, the pro-democracy struggle, who tried to run for election and never went far. So this is a money thing. There is a party thing. After the CD crisis, Campaign for Democracy crisis, we in the pro-democracy movement knew that our fault was that we had not prepared for power. So under the leadership of the late Alao Akabashoro, we formed the Democratic Alternative as a party. But we had no money. We had no money. So we couldn't go far. So it's always down to money. And it's one of the reasons why I'm such a passionate advocate for, I have to, connect to power, but I think I'm losing power on my laptop. I'm talking a passionate advocate for the parliamentary system of government, which at least even within the bourgeois democratic model is less expensive. All you have to do is win elections in your world, in your world. The fact that you are running for president doesn't mean you have to go around the whole country, spending huge sums of money. But if your party wins the majority of votes, then your party will form the government. And if you cannot win the majority of votes and not to form a government, form coalitions and get the government going. And then the flexibility in it, that you don't have to wait for a full 4 years or 5 years, whatever the constitution says, before you hold elections. If the government becomes so unpopular, the opposition can actually make it necessary to call elections. And by the same token, if you have a good government, a good prime minister, a good governor, a good president, it doesn't have to go immediately after 4 years or 8 years. It will be in power as long as this party has the confidence of the people, is governing well, and they're winning elections. Some of the problems we have to tackle in our part of the world are so massive that they do not really actually lend themselves well to these 4 years, 8 years you go. So therefore leading to discontinuity of governance, of vision, of execution and completion of projects. So I like the immense flexibility in the prime ministerial system for cost reasons, for flexibility of change of government, and for the fact that for that reason alone reduces to at least some acceptable extent the influence of money. That is the biggest problem that all true meaning good patriots who will serve the nation diligently often face when they have to run under the present system. And it's a problem common not only to Nigeria, but to all countries where the bourgeois democratic system, is practiced.
Okay, let me show you something you wrote in Premium Times on February 22nd, 2023. You were making the case for Tinubu as your choice of president. And you said you are convinced that Tinubu stands head and shoulders above his two main rivals. The question of national unity, fairness in a clamorous multi-ethnic society such as ours, which Alhaji Atiku Abubakar's candidacy threatens aside. You went on to talk about P2B. You said that I also believe that Tinubu's record as governor of Lagos State is the better compared to Mr. P2B's as governor of Anambra State. So we are now getting into another election year. Tinubu is still going to run for re-election. You may have Atiku or P2B as a candidate. Are you satisfied with how Tinubu has handled his job?
Generally, yes, I am. I still stand by that view because remember, before I got to that point, I had done my analysis and I've given the grounds for getting to that conclusion. I am. Now, again, let me just digress a little bit before I come back. By the time when I wrote at The Guardian, when Obama and Hillary Clinton had emerged as front runners for the ticket of the Democratic Party. And I wrote and celebrated the fact because, one, until, as you know, was it 1920? I don't know the exact, but 1920 something, early 20s, women did not even have the right to vote in America. And for a long time, a woman was more or less 3/5 of a man in the US. Then, of course, I don't have to talk about Obama being Black. Racially speaking, in racial discourse, Black does not necessarily mean black and white does not necessarily mean white as in the plain colors. It is a historical construct. And even by their own racial discourse, made it one drop of blood, made you Black. So it doesn't matter for this purpose, whether you're half white, your mother is white, your mother is Black, or you're an octoroon and the various degrees of whiteness that were made. Once you get a drop of blood, a drop of Black blood, you're Black. And then there was also the straight hair, thing. So there's a Black person, and then there's a woman. And I thought that both of them having the opportunity to contest for the ticket of one of the two major parties of America was in itself worthy of celebration. Every Martin Agu thought otherwise because he felt that either of them, whether Obama or Hillary Clinton, who might end up getting the ticket, will not radically change what America stands for. That America will be an exploitative capitalist country, irrespective of who fronts the ticket for either party, which is actually correct. You can't further if you want to go to core radical, left argument or Marxist criticism. But then I remember that Noam Chomsky, who is not, as you know, a lightweight when it comes to opposition politics, when it comes to left arguments of government, of good society. Noam Chomsky, no less, had talked about how he had his nose to vote for Bill Clinton. And how he said that many people might think that it doesn't matter if the Democrats or the Republicans are in power, but actually it does matter. The difference, you can always trust the Democrats to be good on domestic policy, to be good for the middle class. If there are going to be tax breaks, they will be for the middle class and the poor. That you will never be able to tell what difference $500, $1,000, maybe not the exact figures cited, but something in that region can make to a middle class family that is struggling, to pay the light bill and then to keep a child in school. But you can always trust the Republicans to be good in going to war, giving tax breaks to the rich, wrecking the economy, only for Democrats to come later to clean it up. Now, I'm not quoting him verbatim. I'm just saying I read this argument of his about holding his nose to vote for Clinton. That got me thinking that oftentimes we say, no, this government is not progressive enough for me. None of them, this candidate is good enough for me. In fact, I don't know if it's a very article that you quoted from, but I remember giving a disclaimer right at the beginning. I said, look, if you know you are not going to vote at this election, if your attitude to this election is a plague on all their houses, stop. Don't read any further. I remember saying that. But if you're going to vote, then you may continue. Then I made my argument. One of the arguments I made there was, when did Peter Obi become our great hero of democracy? At the time the fight for democracy was on, when we were fighting the military, when people were in the streets, guns were Abacha, Babangida, annulling June 12, tanks in the street, we were protesting. Where was he? Why did we see him there? So now he's a hero of democracy. And it's not even leading a party that we can say is genuinely different. He leads a man who has sworn never to leave APGA, never to leave APGA, had left it, had gone to not one, but two other parties. So, but in the case of Tinubu, you always know where he was. At least he was in the pro-democracy movement. I can testify to that. So I fought with him. He fought for democracy. He's been governor, Obi had been governor. So we can compare their two, records. And whether you agree with me or not, I said, I like the Tinubu's record better. Now, does that mean Tinubu has to be a Marxist Democrat, a social democrat, or a flaming revolutionary? No, we're not going to get that. The system is not going to enable us to get that. But out of these three, because not only three, there were other candidates, but we know, realistically speaking, these are the three that have any reasonable chance of winning. I'm going to have to make my choice from among those three, unless I just want to cast a protest vote that I know will not count. And if I decided I want to have a say in the person who I know will realistically, yes, that's the article, realistically be president, I had to weigh that decision very carefully down to the minutest detail. That is how I came to that position. That's how I came to realize that at the end of the day, the person who I feel more comfortable with, that has a heart to stand up, as he did against Obasanjo, when Obasanjo meant to overrun the whole country. Now they are talking about, Tinubu wants one-party democracy, as if he's forcing governors out of their beds to decamp But there was a time the PDP was exactly doing that under Obasanjo. And Lagos was basically the only state standing. Obasanjo himself has confessed to it. So, yes, the considerations I'm going to have when I'm dealing with a choice among candidates that are not necessarily the ones I will prefer, the ones that will emerge if the democratic process were far more open, far more inclusive, enabling those who don't have money to come on, but are willing, ready, able to serve the country, might be different. That is a wish. The reality is what I grapple with. And that is that we have candidates, these are the candidates we have, and I have to choose from among them. So, where does that lead us in this election? Is the parliament we have the one we need? The issue at the moment is whether to have a real-time transmission of electoral results or not. And the National Assembly voted in favor of what is more or less a hybrid position. But when you look at it, examine it carefully, you will find that if we do not also pose a problem to democracy ourselves, that is satisfactory. Honestly looking at it, if the law says transmit the results from the polling unit to the IRF, so that's electronic transmission. But in case technology fails, it is not a far-fetched thing that it can fail. We know there are answers to it. This issue has been debated to death, that even in an area where it supposedly fails, especially for battery-powered, card readers and devices. The moment you leave that place to a place where there's network, the results will be transmitted. So we know that. But the bottom line, is this. What is going to be transmitted? It's not real time in terms of electronic voting, but we still don't have electronic voting. So people might be confusing electronic voting with electronic transmission of the results. With electronic voting, as a voting, the result goes. But with the electronic transmission, you're actually still casting a ballot, a paper ballot, and then they will be tallied and counted. The winner will be declared, and the result will be entered into Form EC8. It is that form that is going to be transmitted. So if that is what we have at the moment, and the case is not that we must have electronic voting now, which is not what I'm hearing, which is not what the argument really is, then at the end of the day, whether or not we get accurate transmission of the results from the unit depends on the polling agents. Every party is supposed to have a polling agent at the unit. One of the problems that the Labour Party under Obi had was that it was a new phenomenon. They weren't yet as grounded as the two other parties, APC and PDP. In all the units, the results were published of the number of polling agents that each party had. And you could see that almost by 1 to 3, APC and PDP had more polling agents than the Labour Party, which is not surprising because they were just coming to the scene and they hadn't had enough time to be grounded, to be everywhere. Whereas the results are going to come from the units. Who is going to defend those results? And the law requires the agents to sign the form. So a lot of the rigging that people talk about is even actually the absence of polling agents at the polling unit, or those who are bought out, who are willingly, in fact, there are people, some of these parties, why they insist on being on the ballot, is that they want to be there so that when it comes down to the tallying of the results, they can be influenced to look the other way, so that the major parties have their way. They know they are not winning anyway. So is that an opportunity to get something on election day? So it brings the question back to us as Democrats. How willing are we as Democrats, both at the polling unit level, as party agents, party supporters? So make sure that the results declared in that unit are actually transmitted electronically. And then 2, how willing are we as the leaders, so-called leaders of the party, to adhere to the ethos of democracy? When they win, it is free and fair. So in all the places where the Labour Party won, it was free and fair. But if they don't win, it's not free and fair. In all the places where the PDP won, free and fair. But if they don't win, it's not free and fair. And it even makes it more difficult for us then to objectively say the elections were either rigged or not rigged. Because if when you win, it is free and fair, and then when you don't win, it is not free and fair, then how can we ever agree? Because the day you win, the same principle, the same idea, notion of never agreeing that the election was free and fair because you lost, will be adopted by the losing side. So you'll be saying you want free and fair. Is it people's mandate? But say no, it was rigged. So I guess this is where I feel the problem is. Yes, I think I still stand by my endorsement of Tinubu, because beside all of these things, some of the things he's done are the things that even the pro-democracy movement, the progressives, have been advocating for. Local government autonomy, for instance. Power generation by the states, taken from exclusive legislative list.
I thought Buhari did that. No?
Okay, well, okay, let's just say continuity of government. But we're talking about when the policy becomes more known to the public and, yeah. So I see the APC government. Buhari doing it, Tinubu doing it, or carrying on with it, going on with that. Right now, we're talking about state police. He has actually asked the National Assembly to begin to consider seriously the question of state police. That we cannot police our forests. We cannot police every part of this country using the federal police alone. This argument has been on, you know that. Now, sometimes, for me personally, who was in that group, that pro-democracy part, that said, unless we have a sovereign national conference, through which you can write the articles of association for the country, and know we are having a document that truly lives up to we the people have enacted for ourselves, that everything is just the same old story. And that's why we turned our back in 1999. And then enabled people who were fighting for 4 more years for Abacha to come out of the woodworks and take over the terrain. So if we don't have a sovereign national conference, yes, which is going to always be a hard sell, as you know, for many reasons we can go into now, or we don't need to go into. And yet, some of the things we want, some of the things on our wish list are already coming to pass. Maybe short of the restructuring of the country, which we basically.
So you are, just because we don't have a lot of time. By the time we get to Biodun and literature and your work, let me just say, you agree. You are saying to us that you think that Tinubu did well, that he deserves a second term in office. Is that?
I'm saying so because where we were is so bad. We're in a country where states were going to Abuja to beg for money to pay salaries. I was one of those who fought against subsidy removal. But after a hard consideration, I realized that in the end, yes, we're getting a token. We could pay 190 naira, 120 naira at the pump. But the people who were making the hundreds of millions and billions were far away. We are fighting for the billionaires and the plutocrats to benefit from the subsidy scam. So if removing it in the end frees money for the states, now it's our duty now to hold the states responsible. What are you doing with the money, the greater sums of money you're receiving from the federation account now?
So, Ogaga, hold on. Are you not worried that Nigeria, as a result of these policies that Tinubu put in place, that a lot of people in Nigeria now fell into poverty, what they call multidimensional poverty?
Oh, yeah.
You're concerned, and
yes, sure.
You think that the government is addressing it, or no?
No. See, I am, but again, when you have to, how shall I put it? Because it's anytime you say this, you're opening yourself up to attacks. Just like I've seen the attacks, even the response to that article that he put. Abia was attacked, but that's not the issue. For me, always it is: am I convinced? Have I thought about this thing deeply, and am I convinced? Even if I may be wrong, but am I convinced? If I'm convinced, I will articulate my position. That's why you will see that there's no position that we hold that I'm not also articulated, maybe even publish an article on. So I am convinced. How would I not be? Everybody bears the body. So there's hunger.
Hold on.
Yeah, there's hunger.
Hold on.
There's hunger.
This is the issue.
There's hunger.
When you make a case like you're making, the government people will make this case. And then the poor people will say, you are not living the way you should live because things are hard. You're still living in fact, you're increasing the way you live. Money they spend,
Okay.
the money they spend. If you look at the budget, see the money they spend buying cars, buying
Yes,
decorating.
that's a different thing. We are talking about corruption in the government. We are still talking about waste in the government.
But when the government is telling, when the government is telling you, when Tinubu is telling Nigerian people, things are difficult, we have to do this, otherwise the country will go broke. We have to tighten our belt. He's not tightening his belt. He's not tightening his belt.
Yeah,
People are saying
Rudolph,
that.
what you're saying that are they living by example? That's what you're saying.
Mhm.
Are the people in government not still living large? That's what you're saying. And I'm saying it's our task to hold them, keep their feet to the fire. Make sure.
Is it by re-electing them?
Okay, now when you say it's not by re-electing them per se, but the question, like I've asked before, I've been on TV before and I asked this question. There's poverty. Once you float the currency, once you remove subsidy, you know what is going to come. That's why all governments, look at all of them, right from Obasanjo to Jonathan, Yar'Adua, they've all wanted to do this. And Obi, Atiku also pledged that they will remove subsidy. Don't forget, they were going to remove subsidy. So the question is not whether it should be removed. They will remove it themselves. What people were raking Tinubu over the coast for was that he did not prepare for the removal or the subsidy, cushion the effect of removal of subsidy. And my argument is, okay, yes, you may be right, but the subsidy is going to be removed anyway. And there's only so much you can cushion it, because that's just subsidy. Then there's also the floating of the naira. And we are an import-dependent country. We don't produce. We import every damn thing under the sun. Therefore, putting so much strain on the dollar, so that the exchange rate between the dollar and the naira is so high that we can never get real value. The times in the past that were called the halcyon days, the good old days, those are the days, for instance, when 60 kobo to a dollar, or when it became bad, 1 naira to a dollar, 1 naira 20 kobo, until structural adjustment program came and the spiraling, began. So if these two things, if they were going to do them, the question is, is anyone really saying that poverty, hunger will not have resulted in the interim? How long is that interim? That's a question that we may debate. But whether we should remove subsidy was no longer an issue with Atiku and Obi, all of them saying they will remove subsidy. The question is what will be done after that. Now, if you remove subsidy today, will we automatically, be refining all the oil that we need? No. Will we automatically be producing all that we need? No. But there are efforts being made in that direction. Now, with the Dangote refinery, more or less, to a certain degree, it has brought some stability to that sector. It's still way too expensive per liter. But what is the alternative? So I asked them when I appeared on I made a general challenge. Yes, ADC, you're saying there's hunger. Okay, yes. And the sole reason for the hunger is that these two things were done. What would you do? Does that mean when you come to power, you will bring back subsidies? Does that mean when you come to power, you will not be artificially propping up the value of the dollar, of the naira versus the dollar, foreign currencies? What will you do? That's what we need to know. So, but if you ask me, within the space of 2 years, and the things he has had to do and take a lot of criticism for, the other things I think we can more legitimately criticize him for. These two things, I think they needed to be done. They were major dysfunction to the economy while we're going forward. And if they needed to be done, there must necessarily be pain after that. I'm bearing the pain too. And I know there are those who are bearing it even more than me. But that is going to be the case either way, once you remove the subsidy. So that's my argument. That's my response to them. So when you say, is it by electing them? I'll say, well, not necessarily so, but you look at the record and then you say, the people who you would rather elect, what would they do? We must insist that they answer this question. Because these are the two joint reasons why we are having the hardship that they are using as a calling card right now. What would you do regarding those two things to start with, before the bigger questions of nation being that we have?
Ogaga, you have to come back because we've not touched anything and we are half hour away from,
I'll be happy to come back.
You were the Niger Delta Development Commission as a member
Yes.
of the board of directors. You were there for 2 years. The Niger Delta people in that region are still complaining, despite all the money that they are getting. that their lives are not improving. What did you do there as a member of the board? What did you see? What is the problem? Why is it that Bayelsa, Rivers, Delta, with all the money they get, that people are still complaining?
I think it's going to be more of what did I see than what did I do, because I was just a member of the board and an executive position. It's policy oversight, and then as a state rep, inspecting projects, and so on. So what I saw before I joined NDDC, or at least I got on the board, I would have sworn that no good whatsoever could come out of NDDC, and that they were not capable of any good. But when I got there, when I saw the sheer number of projects, even in my state alone, the sheer number of projects, even in my 2 local governments alone, and the possibility, the potential they had for good work, I changed my mind. But the problems of governance that attend everything good in Nigeria are the same things that bedevil NDDC. I've also written about it. The only opportunity I had to meet President Buhari around the time when rumors were rife again that the board was going to be dissolved. The 3 things I discussed with him, NDDC was number 1. And I implored him not to accede to any pressure to dissolve the board. Why? Since the founding of NDDC, only one board, the one that was headed by the inaugural chairman, Onyema Ugochukwu, is the one that served its 4 terms. Every other board was already dissolved. Now tell me, whether it's a bank, a manufacturing company, any business, private sector, that never has a board that lasts beyond 2 years, what kind of consistency can there be? What kind of balance sheet can they present with their shareholders? So that's one problem. And why was it so? Too much politics. Too much politics. Politics has penetrated to every aspect. And then the bureaucracy. The more they dissolve the boards, the more management has to fall in the hands of acting, sole administrators, acting MDs, and then it's the civil servants who will run the place. Then a board is inaugurated. Before they can know what is going on, it's dissolved again. It was so bad that in my state, Delta, when I did a memo to replace broken down office furniture, supplies, and so on, I still have a copy of the memo. We had to go to Port Harcourt, the headquarters, to replace office furniture. And we have a state office headed by a director at grade level 17. And the whole idea was to devolve powers to the state members where the people are, where the work, the projects are to be executed. But there we were. To buy photocopying paper, to replace a broken chair, we had to go to Port Harcourt. And over 26 minutes after, it still had not been approved. And it was not approved before I left the board. And then the whole of it, that's one part. Then the whole of Nigeria, especially the politicians, so interested, so invested in Niger Delta. It's like the Niger Delta Development Commission is like an ATM, a cash cow. This is not something I'm just making up. Even the current MD, Dr. Obuku, when he marked his 50th birthday and did 2 books on the Niger Delta, I was asked to review one of them. He said that himself. How politicians sabotage NDDC. Ghost projects that were not meant to be executed, that will be awarded. And usually for massive amounts of money. One of them is called desilting, the desilting of creeks in the Niger Delta. Once you hear desilting, you just know drain pipe, swamp. That project is not meant to be done. It's just meant to get money out. So to even get paid when you executed the projects, you need powers outside the Niger Delta, in Abuja, So the whole thing is such a mess that I said, President, what you need to do is to stand behind the board, give it marching orders, say in the next 24 to 36 months, this and this and this I want done. Don't listen to any special interest, because the NDDC is a special category agency under the direct supervision of the president. So give them your backing, so that when those who are so invested, who are profiting from NDDC, start fighting, the board knows they have you have their back, and they can do the right thing, and then give them milestones, to achieve. So, and several other ideas, that I mentioned, including ones I've mentioned on other platforms at other events. So, will NDDC change? Is it doing any good? It's doing some good, but not enough good. I can testify that NDDC does some good. Actually, a great amount of good, depending on the circumstances. There are communities, for instance, in the riverine area, that providing just a jetty for them, a jetty, is the only thing that can make a difference in their lives, for a start. There are schools where rebuilding the block of 6 classrooms is the one thing that can make sure that our children at least are learning. There are places where constructing the 1.5 to 2 kilometer road is what links them, makes it possible for them to bring their goods from the farms and whatever else they're trading in to the nearest town, nearest city, to be part of any economy of the Niger Delta. Before you talk about the projects we call the mega projects, the ones that connect communities, So there are lots of them. NDDC just have to be allowed to do its work as an interventionist agency. I don't know how soon that can happen, but if I were president, I know exactly what I would do to make NDDC deliver to the people in the Niger Delta.
All right, well, we take a break. When we come back, we talk about Biodun Jeyifo and literature, your work, your poetry, your new book that is coming out. And then we will invite our audience to come in and talk to you. All right, so let's take about 3 minutes break. right, welcome back, everybody. Thank you so much for staying with us. We're having a conversation with Dr. Ogaga Ifowodo. Ogaga, most of you may not know, is a very well-known poet, an award-winning poet, and he also is a lawyer. He practices in Abuja as of today. Now, Ogaga, last I think last month, we're now in May. In March, we lost Biodun Jeyifo. You describe him as one of Africa's most important scholars. In 1 minute, can you explain to Nigerians why they should care about his work?
Well, certainly to those who are in the humanities, who have paid attention to the arena of post-colonial literary and cultural discourse, he needs no introduction. And then for those who were active, certainly in Nigeria, in the 70s going forward, again, it needs no introduction. But the founding president of the Academic Staff Union of Universities, ASU, and laid the groundwork for what we know today as ASU. We all know that ASU, at least if not now, this moment we're speaking, definitely in those critical years of the struggle against military dictatorship and the takeover of our campuses, was the one organization that stood as an unshakable wall against the efforts of the military regimes of the day, starting from the Ali Must Go protest of 1978, when Obasanjo was a military dictator, to destroy completely autonomy of the universities and to begin to meddle, in curricula, in what lecturers taught. By the time we go to the ABU crisis of 1986 and the Abisoye panel, and then the Akombi panel, and all the things that followed, the notion of lecturers not being paid to teach what they were not paid to teach, something like that, not teach what they are not paid to teach, came up. So the gradual hunting down of progressive academics began. There was a mass purge from the universities, Calabar, Lagos, Ibadan, after the Ali Must Go protest. And one of the things that BJ did, fondly called BJ, by the way, Professor Biodun Jeyifo, fondly called BJ, did, was to fight for the reinstatement of all of those lecturers and then the absorption of students who were dismissed and those who will not be readmitted to their previous institutions, given admission in other institutions to continue their program. And then generally lay the blueprint for fighting for university autonomy, improve conditions of service, and making sure that our universities can compete, with their peers and the rest of the world. And when it came to scholarship, at least in his field, he had no peer. I mean, he was the equal of any, whether at home or abroad. And it is this quality that was recognized early enough that when he came to the US, he had the distinction of being a professor emeritus at 2 Ivy League universities. He spent 18 years at Cornell, which is where I became a student, strictly speaking, though I've been informally a student as a young member of the progressive, radical left in Nigeria. And then, but became more strictly speaking, formally speaking, his student as a postgraduate student at Cornell. In the year of my candidacy, he left for Harvard, but he remained a co-chair of my dissertation committee. And his work, especially on Soyinka, that's quite apart from the Yoruba traveling theater and theater practice generally in the third world, in the post-colony. Let's just use a word that captures all of that, which also includes ways of reading even North America as a colony, post-colony, and Ireland as colony, post-colony. His work in that field, which now becomes comparative literature, is also immensely respected. His seminal book on Soyinka, Wole Soyinka, Politics, Poetics, and post-colonialism is regarded as the definitive study on Soyinka. So, and then, of course, many diverse articles, one of my favorite being the one about the absence of Okonkwo's mother in Things Fall Apart and what that means for the reading of post-colonial African literature. He had these interesting ways of coming into the arguments in post-colonial discourse, terms like arrested development, and so on, that is well respected beyond any argument in academia. So yes, it's deserving of celebration. And it was only in January that we gathered together to celebrate his 80th year on Earth, where he showed surprising vigor for someone actually who had been fighting serious health battles for the past 20 years, specifically speaking, renal failure. In fact, there are those of us who believe that if he hadn't even been in the US, for the greater part of that time, he may not have even lived to be 60, let alone 70, So, yes, he's very deserving of every accolade, of every tribute, every homage being paid to him as a pillar, an iroko of of post-colonial literary discourse and theory.
Mm. How is he different from someone like Chinwezo or Abiola Irele? How?
Chinwezo, I don't know. I don't think there's a basis for comparison, actually. Chinwezo is a polemicist. He's a polemicist. Whereas Biodun Jeyifo is a scholar in the real sense of the term. True scholarship, not just polemicism, not arguments for the sake of polarizing discourse and hoping by sheer rhetorical force to win, but going down to the nitty-gritty of the subject, good literature review, find out the angles, the places where the arguments are not yet being conducted or are still unsatisfactory, and helping us to clear away the woods, Say, for instance, I don't think I even need to even cite him. Some of the bigger battles in the 80s were between, and the 70s, were between Shoinka and Chinwezo. When Chinwezo dismissed, the so-called modernist quartet of Shoinka, poets, Shoinka, Okibo, J.P. Clark, and then to some extent, I think Okara too, as basically, not nativist enough. So his method, his ideology was, as it were, nativism. If you are showing as a kind of essentialist, loyal to some essentialism, something that supposedly is essential to the African and not to any other human being that distinguishes us as Africans, that you cannot find in any other ethnic or racial, quote unquote, group, then you are advancing African literature and culture. But if supposedly you betrayed any sympathies towards Western aesthetics, then you were more or less a sellout. You were in fact a native informant. That's the kind of argument you will get. And even when he wrote about women, in fact, he's accused of being some kind of, chauvinist, male chauvinist, that. So he's a polemicist, but Biodun Jeyifo was the core scholar who actually does the real intellectual labor.
What about Abiola?
As for Abiola Irele, I would say, yes, Abiola Irele belongs to that same school of core intellectual work that will pass the test, peer-reviewed work that can stand rigor, or scrutiny, anywhere. Just that they works. I'm not going to say that I have done a comparison of both, but I do know that Biodun Jeyifo had immense respect for Abiola Irele, just as many others, had immense respect for him. I think he also did a tribute to him. I don't know what the occasion was, but this is something also documented. So they belong to the same tradition of genuine scholarly engagements with issues, with ideas, rather than just polemicizing.
Are there young people doing that kind of work today?
There are. The thing about scholarly work is that if you're not in the field, and if you're not reading the journals in their field where they publish their work, you wouldn't know. and it's not many. For instance, how many people know about Tejumola Olaniyan, who unfortunately, died, I think, was it 2 years ago or 3 years ago, began his career as a student at Ife. Well, he's actually a student of Biodun Jeyifo, and then did his PhD at Cornell, was occupying an endowed chair at the University of Wisconsin in Madison, how many people know about him? How many people know about Kunle George? And I can name a whole number of scholars like that people know. I know about Femi Taiwo, for instance, who was in the area of philosophy, So if you're not in the field, you wouldn't know. But there are people who are actually doing respectable intellectual work in their respective fields of the humanities, at least the one I'm familiar with, especially in the literature and culture society, side. So there are.
So when you look at the literature scene today in Africa, or we zero it down to Nigeria, who is performing well? Who do you think their work will last for the next 10 years? Who are the new Achebe thinkers?
Well, the obvious answer that everybody will know is that Chimamanda, Adichie, definitely, because first of all, her work has been so widely accepted and has entered the canon so early, So yes, her work will last. But it tends to always be the case that it is in fiction that people get the kind of attention that bring them to the reading public. People who are working in theater, for instance, people who do poetry, they are hardly known. They tend to labor more or less for the love of it, and then will be known almost like in a cult-like way by people who still read poetry or people who still go to the theater, And in these days of TikTok and Snapchat and instant videos and video messaging, content creation, we don't know how many people are actually going to the theater. But then Nollywood, if at least at the more formal way. But in terms of the good old literature, plays, novels, poems, there are writers working. You only need to see how many submissions come for the Nigerian Prize for Literature, sponsored by NLNG, and even those old Anna prizes for the different categories that people are writing. Some are still reading, but how much of it will last? We can't. How much of it is going to endure? How much of it will enter the canon? It's too early for us to say. You will have to wait for time. That's why I said you can safely mention Chimamanda simply because her work is universally known now and has entered, quote unquote, the canon very early. But not many people are going to have that luck, So,
what do you think about Akweke Emeze?
To be honest, I have not. I'm not yet familiar. Because when I came back, one of the things I had to grapple with was the fact that I had left academia. So I was no longer immediately connected to academia. And the need to also be up to date with what is happening. And then when I came back, the whole problems of relocation or trying to find my feet, even when I'm still trying to perfect my return to Nigeria, means that there's only so much I can do to follow all that is going on, So yes, I'm up to date to a certain extent, but I'm afraid not to the extent where I can do a kind of comparative analysis of who and who is doing work in these various genres and who is likely to go. And there's a way in which you also talk about it, where it can almost become like you're choosing who, to promote or to give a shout out to.
Mm. But have you heard about Chigozie Obioma?
Yes, definitely. That's a fisherman, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, yes, all right. Now, let's take a look at your work, because you have been you've been producing, you've been out there a lot, but you won an award. Remind me with the oil lamp,
yes.
which what was that award? Is it the Anna Prize?
Yeah, it's called the Anna Okara, Gabriel Okara Prize. I don't know if it's still being awarded that way. By the time I won it, it was the Anna Gabriel Okara Poetry Prize.
Okay. And then, of course, this Homeland and other.
Well, actually, this is the very, very, very first edition. The African World Press edition is really the one, which is the second edition. Yes, but yeah, that's my first book of poems.
Okay, and here this is this is your work.
Yeah, this is my scholarly work.
Okay, history, trauma, and healing in post-colonial narratives. So there was this famous quote where Chimamanda Adichie said that post-colonial studies, I'm not quoting her exactly, more or less dismissing people who specialize in post-colonial studies. What do you make of post-colonial African studies?
Well, first of all, I never saw that, and if I would like to see what she said and the context in which she said it. But I doubt that anybody could dismiss post-colonial studies. There must have been a special tangent, specific claim she was making. Post-colonial studies as a field is so important that I don't think she could dismiss it like that. But that said, it's a legitimate, valid, liberating field of study. Very exciting, actually. If you don't get into it, you might not know. Maybe for those who, from a distance, heard so much about the postmodernism, post-structuralism ideas that dominated literary theory and criticism, especially in the 80s, and who think that must necessarily have also compromised post-colonial studies, they could think so. But we've just been talking about Biodun Jeyifo, for instance. And I also mentioned that some people might not be aware of the work of, say, someone like Tejumola Olani or Kunle George, Femi Taiwo, and we could go on and on. They are not the only ones. There's Mudimbe. I mean, I don't want to make this into a listing of people, heavyweights in post-colonial studies. But this is a field that we have to remember was constituted by such seminal figures of the anti-colonial struggle and anti-imperialism as Frantz Fanon, as what's this person who wrote the Albert Membi, and then of people like this famous post-colonial, anti-colonial. Why we'll be talking for a long time. His work is usually very much. I will remember here as we go along. But then Edward Said, just to mention, some founding figures: Albert Memmi, Edward Said, Frantz Fanon. That's already giving you a very solid idea of the constitutive elements or founders of that discipline. How can that not be something that is relevant to us now? By the way, my scholarly work, which you just showed the cover of the book, owes its inspiration to Frantz Fanon of Black Skin, White Masks, which was his psychoanalysis of the colonial problem. That was the book with which he began his career as a theorist of domination, of colonialism and anti-imperialism. Then he ended his work with his most famous book, The Wretched of the Earth. The closing chapter of that book is called Colonial Wars and Mental Disorders. So he brought an African interpretation and perspective to psychoanalysis. And in Black Skin, White Mask, he famously said that only a psychoanalytical approach to the Black problem can lay bare the anomalies of affect that are responsible for the structure of the complex. Now, he used that to then do a series of essays, about how, colonialism not only tries to dominate us materially, but do away with our culture. All right. Again, I don't know why the name is eluding me, because I cite him copiously, national culture in the context of the national liberation in my work. but I know I will remember him as we go along. But what I'm saying, therefore, is that that field speaks to our reality, our lived experience, colonialism and neo-colonialism. Even now, that I don't think anybody who dismisses it can possibly know what it's really about, may have been mistaken about what he or she is actually, opposed to in the field of post-colonial studies.
Now, your poetry has often engaged with state violence, memory, and injustice. Um, do you see yourself as a poet or a witness or an activist? I asked that question knowing that you were detained by Abacha. And how did that experience reshape your understanding of literature's role in confronting power?
I didn't need to be detained to come to that notion or the role of literature, the liberating aspects of memory, of witnessing, writing, storytelling, which is what to me, it doesn't matter, whether it is poetry or drama or fiction. It's really storytelling. It's narratives. It's saying who we are. It's whether it's even a flower that you are writing about, you're talking about something in your lived experience, in your lived environment. That speaks to a moment. You can be speaking about the flower as a celebration of just sheer beauty, or you can be speaking of the flower as a metaphor for a longing for what is not yet that you wish to be. So an ode to the tomato, it has to take a specific moment and a specific place to be able to write an ode to the tomato, like Pablo Neruda, did. So all writing at the end of the day is political, in the sense that you speak from a specific point, a position, and it's your way of seeing, of knowing, of understanding and interpreting at that point. It's a feeling you're conveying, and there's something that feeds that feeling, that enables you to feel that way. You could very easily feel in a different way. All said and done, imprisonment, yes, can enrich our perspective, but it is not necessary, because one of the great things about literature is the power to imagine being in the place of the other. A fiction, because you have not lived it, but it's as if you've lived it. So when I read War and Peace, I've never been to Russia. I've never been in a war. I've never fought even the civil war in Nigeria. It happened when I was being born, So, but that is a book about war in a different crime. Yet it speaks to me. Crime and punishment, the ethical philosophy behind crime and punishment. Does committing a crime supposedly to serve a great good absolve you of the crime? And in what way? Does taking away the happiness of another advance your happiness? And if it does, is that a good thing or not? Can it actually? All these things, we don't have to have experienced them ourselves, but we can imagine them. The gift of empathy is probably the first thing any good writer must have, to imagine it, to be in the shoes of the other, to be the character, to know the character, bring that character to life, interact with other characters in a certain setting, grappling with a human situation. I think all of these, a writer can very well, come to realize to a more or less degree of success in writing about them, but without necessarily the experience or without necessarily experiencing, them. So I have tried, nevertheless, to make my work respond to the times that I live in and to bear witness to those times. I'm a strong believer in the poetry of witness, that we must bear witness to our times and the period we live in.
All right. We will take anybody who wants to come in and ask questions. But before I let people in, you have a new book coming out. What is it about? Why Does God Need a Gun? Is that the title?
Yeah, that's the title. Why does God need a gun? The work started as meditations on creeds and the incredulous. By looking at some of those outlandish things, those really incredulous things that we do in the name of God, in the name of religion, in the name of faith. But the core of this collection is a poem, a long poem with different subtitles called From the Forest of a Million Demons. Leah Sharibu Lifts the Veil. That's the title. And at a certain point, Leah Sharibu, who the whole world has come to know as a poster child of the war against not only girl education, but Western education in general, famously as you know, expatiated by a group called Boko Haram. They have a long Islamic name, but the people just call them Boko Haram. People are against book knowledge, book. So that is forbidden. Book is forbidden. Learning is forbidden. Leah Sharibu famously was going to be freed if she renounced her faith and converted to Islam. She did not convert, as though she was held back. It was threatening that they were going to sell her as a slave or kill her. We don't know if she's alive at the moment. So that singular act made her the poster child. But before the Chibok girls, there were also the Dapchi girls who had been captured. Then there were the 60-something students of federal government college, that were burned to death in their hostels. All kinds of atrocities. So I thought I would use that as the entry point of my meditations on this. And then also to make it live. What Boko Haram or the groups, the terrorists who kidnaps the Dapchi girls and the Chibok girls want to do is to erase them, symbolized by forcing them to wear the burqa, and hide their identity. Let them not be heard from. So my mission was to make Leah Sharibu speak for herself, give her agency. And in that process, while she's in captivity, the moment comes when she's actually engaging her captors, and that question is spoken by her. Why does God need a gun? Why does your God need a gun? So that is the title of the book.
All right. I have a comment from your friend. He said I should tell you he couldn't come in, but I should read this for you. This is from Paikide. You know him?
Paikide, of course. Who doesn't know Paikide?
Now, he said Biodun Jeyifo.
Roland.
He said Biodun Jeyifo left Nigeria worse than he met it. His activism reduced to mere academic chatter, with his fellow intellectuals reduced to scrambling for crumbs to maintain their stomachs and ideology, relegated to the expensive pages of paywalled academic journals. Good people like Ogaga have basically been reduced to using the power of their oratory to defend the evil that their prose and poetry once railed against. I asked Ogaga, what is the purpose of literature? Why are we here if we can defend the likes of Bola Tinubu? The intellectual class has been a sellout, period.
It is not a new charge from Ikide. This is a recycled charge. I'm very familiar, with it.
Oh, okay. You're familiar with this?
Yeah. On the one hand, Ikide, as you know, is a very good reader, a perceptive reader. He loves literature. He knows what literature does. So that first part of the question, I don't need to answer it. The role of literature in society is fully aware of it. The question about being reduced to ineffectiveness, begging for crumbs or whatever it may be, that's also something that I think as a student of society, he knows that it is too quick a judgment. And as a matter of fact, it shouldn't be coming from someone like him. Look, ideas, when you labor in the realm of ideas, very often power has its way. It doesn't mean that the fact that your ideas have not won today means that you have been reduced to a tottering old fool or somebody who is just begging for crumbs. It doesn't. It's like, the idea, Ken Saro-Wiwa, when he led Mossad, no one could accuse him of not being actively opposed to the regime of the day that oppressed the minority of the Niger Delta. He internationalized that struggle, gave it a name, brought the conscience of the world to bear witness for it. He was murdered. Does that mean that Ken Saro-Wiwa's life was wasted? Is of no use? I mean, he was wasted together with 8 of his Ogoni compatriots. Well, so BJ was not killed, was not assassinated. He lived. So you say, if he continues to do his work as an intellectual, he's writing for expensive pages that the people will not read. Even if he wrote for the newspaper, but you know that this is not the places where he wrote. So Ikide is not being honest if he said so. For a long time, BJ had maintained a presence in the pages of the newspapers, even as a student for sketch newspaper. He even had a pen name, Bamako Jaji. A lot of people do not know. Bamako Jaji, that was BJ. Then to his days on the pages of the African Guardian. These are popular mediums now. These are not elite, expensive journals that the masses of the people cannot access. We're talking about African Guardian, The Guardian, then the Talakawa Liberation Courier, which he wrote both for The Guardian and The Nation. He collected a vast volume of his newspaper writings against the Predator Republic that was published by Carolina Academic Press and then published in Nigeria by Bookcraft. So I don't think it's honest or at least accurate on the part of Ikide to say academic scholars who's calling. They are not soldiers. They are not politicians in the sense of card-carrying members of parties running for office. We're all political beings, but so doing their work honestly, and you say because they are doing their work honestly and they have not got the change that they desire, they fought for, therefore they should be dismissed, they are irrelevant. They may very well, the idea may very well be the ideas that govern, who knows, 10 years hence, 50 years hence, 100 years hence. So, okay, for that reason too, shall we say those who advocated big ideas for society, but which never came to be in their time, were a failure? If Moses did not make it to the promised land, are the Israelites not in the land that supposedly God said he had promised to them to take over from children he also created, who are also his children, to take over from them? But are they not there now? So I would say that Ikide, my good friend, should not allow our disappointment about the sheer slow pace of change in our country or in any society. Again, I go back to Achebe. Social change is slow and painful. We may not get the results we want or are fast enough or at the level we want them, but change is the only thing that is constant. So if you want to do an honest criticism of BJ, I would say, let him show me in his work a major contradiction where he became a sellout. Then we can engage with that. And with respect to me, again, I've said it. I've written in my position, I've articulated them, and I say, I believe in them. If I believe in change, and if you're a human being that doesn't grow, who stays ossified, who rides a high horse, and believes that the idea that you had yesterday is for now and tomorrow, almost like the doctrine of God that doesn't change yesterday, today, and tomorrow, then you're going to the realm of dogma. It means you can't change. But society is always changing. We are learning new things. We are dealing with complex situations where you have to make a decision. And the decision you are making is among, if you like, if you want to call it that way, they are all thieves. Well, they are all thieves. But one of those thieves is going to be the one who is in charge, who will actually make the decisions as to how much tax you pay, how you will pay, whether your schools will be given priority or only the billionaire class will be given priority. They are small, at the end of the small decisions. But those decisions matter to us. And whether you like it or not, one of them is going to be, you either say, because of that, I am checking out. I am not going to vote at all. But whether you vote or not, somebody's going to emerge as president. And you will see pay tax. You will see be beholden to the state that he governs, that he presides over. So I've come to the view that I would rather be involved. Because in 1999, when we stood on our high horse and said, unless we have a sovereign national conference, this whole bullshit is going to continue. And then we turn our backs, stuck our fingers at our nostrils, turn our faces to the sky. And then those who were campaigning for 4 more years for Abacha came and deep in the rot. And I don't want that anymore. I would rather be involved, even be seen to be wrong in my decision at the moment, but earnestly believe, because I've articulated my reasons for it, than to either be aloof, turn my back, or to claim that they are all the same. Therefore, don't deal with them. We must engage. That essentially is my question. We must engage. And I gave you the example of no less a personality than Noam Chomsky, making me reconsider that view, that you can be so radical that you will feel that nothing is going to happen, there's no difference between them, and you end up only empowering those who will do the most damage to you when you get to power. And the small good that could have come from one of them, you let it go. So like the Americans will say, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. I guess that's the way to sum my position up. But as for President Tinubu, I still believe that given our circumstances, the context in which he emerged, he was a far better candidate among all of them. That is not to say that Obi is a bad man, by the way. And that's not to refuse to acknowledge the extraordinary dimension he brought to our policy. One of them being, he excited and got the youth engaged. I became engaged as a youth right from university. So I know what excitement there is in youth being involved. Down to NSAS, we led the anti-SARS protest in 1989, University of Benin, famously for 3 days. So I know that. And that thing that Obi did is a plus for our society. It's enough to even give him the highest honor of the land, to get our youth excited, engaged, paying attention beyond TikTok and Snapchat, to not really pay attention to the issues of the day about the electoral process, how to make it respond to our needs. They may not have won today. Does that mean the idea has gone? No. They may win tomorrow. So my answer is that if we don't win today, it doesn't mean we are irrelevant. We've been reduced to nothingness. And all our struggles and whatever we're doing have become, therefore, a sellout. We're impotent, like ash. No, tomorrow may be our day.
Let's stay a little bit on Ikide. So for those watching, if you want to come into the studio, the link is up there. If you have questions, you don't want to come in, you can put it on the comment section. I will try to get to them. Ikide has this idea that people don't read anymore, but that they don't read books like the type you write, but people read on social media. I brought a publisher here a while ago, and he told me that any book in Nigeria that sells 2,000 copies is a best-selling book. Why is that? Is it that you don't have 2,000 writers that can afford books in Nigeria that will make any book to be a bestseller if 2,000 copies is what it takes?
I wish I had the answer, but the truth is, writing and reading have always been bourgeois pastimes. That's the truth. In fact, the novel did not come to be until after the Industrial Revolution. You needed that class of people who had leisure time, who are not engaged in the fields, who are not working when the sun is up, and then by the time they get home, they are so exhausted, put food on the table, mind the children, go to sleep, and wake up the next day to repeat the cycle of laboring in the fields. You need a new class of people who have the leisure, for whom there's a certain class that is paid labor that is working and producing, and they're taking the benefit of that labor, or at least indirectly benefiting from it, and therefore they don't have to work. They don't have to be, in that sense, engaged in the fields or even in the factories, and therefore write. And then you also have you have to have a leisure class. The rise of the university cadre, those who went to universities, studied the classics, even if they were British or rather English, they would write even in Latin, French, So just basically a literati which is not the masses.
But Ogaga in the 80s, 70s, 80s, people were reading in Nigeria, but they're not reading now. I mean, I don't know where you went to, but we read Pesetas, we read
but people are reading. Like you said, that even the kid admits that people are reading, but they're not reading the source, or maybe the medium for the reading has changed, at least vastly, because it's still stories. Those stories, if they are being read on handheld devices, or they are reading Kindle versions, for instance, electronic versions. Books these days are being published, and any publisher who is publishing today and does not bring an electronic version of your book out, don't publish with him. Don't publish with him. Every publisher that is serious must today have an electronic version of your work. It doesn't matter what genre. So he admits himself that people are reading. I think the technology, the medium through which what is being read is brought to them is what has changed. I've not done the study to say in the 70s, 70% of Nigerians were reading, and now only 50% are reading, for instance. I don't have raw statistics of that nature. But I've also encountered people who will tell me, Ogaga, I used to read your column religiously. And I would say, I would never have thought such a person, read the newspaper. And that is even a popular medium, let alone the novel or the collection of poems, which they may not even hear of. But even if they hear of it, it's not as if it is at their doorstep. They can't just come to the corner store and buy, even if it's Chimamanda, they cannot go to the corner store and buy, Americana or Dream Count. They may hear of it, they may know of it. It's like a lot of people know Soyinka as a writer, but they have not read a single book, by him. And the closest they may have come to reading him actually will be maybe a newspaper publication, or when it's on television and they are quoting him, addressing a gathering, and so on. So what I'm not going to say is that I think people are reading. What they are reading, that we don't have pace setters anymore. And even then, I never read a pace setter, by the way. It was not my kind of literature. I never read. I knew of it. I knew all the titles, but I never read. That was not my kind. I was not going to spend time reading pace setters. Even the African Writer series, there was so much dross, in the African Writer series. I know that now in hindsight. There were only a few of them that were really worth, the paper they were printed on. But still, all I'm saying is that people are reading. Let's not actually dismiss them and say they're not reading. What they are reading and how they are reading it is what has changed. So we have to learn to bring our work to them through those means, to the extent possible. But we also have to admit that we are never going to make people read Macbeth, the way they will read any airport, Robert Ludlum or, that kind of, literature. They are not. Because the people who read those kind of pop literature are not the kind of people who are going to have the patience to sit down and grapple with to be or not to be, or grapple with waiting for Godot, and so on. So they read. Let's just give them that credit.
All right. Thank you so much. Let's give a chance to Oti. Welcome to the show. We can hear you, Oti.
Has he unmuted himself?
Yeah, Oti, we can't hear you at all. I don't know if you can hear us. We can hear you.
Maybe he has not unmuted himself.
No, he did. I think his connection. Are you using any earpiece? Okay, go back and come back in. Go out and come back in, and then we see if that works. All right. So let me ask you. We talked about Abacha and the time you were detained. How was that experience like then? Where were you detained? Was it the?
Well, you see, because there's a sense in which, because I was working in civil liberties, I was a member of the Civil Liberties Organization. I was in charge of our annual reports project. I was coordinating our work at the African Commission, and I was now and then doing pro bono, cases, So there's a sense in which one felt, and because of those reporting about the experiences of people who have been detained, of course, that famously, one of the ways in which the CLO emblazoned its name into the minds of Nigerians was through the Itaoko report, when that island, off the Atlantic coast, where they were detaining people without trial. CLO got involved and had them freed. And then we started working in the prisons and having people who are waiting trial come and looking so emaciated, and the sheer number of them, until when we published that book, Behind the Wall, which actually opened the eyes of Nigerians to what was going on. Then every year, as I compile the annual reports, there'll be a special chapter on prisons and prison conditions. So the sense in which one was already familiar with what to expect, was a kind of conditioned to what to expect. But happily, I have to say, I would say I did not have the worst experience, but still it's not a good experience. I was arrested at the, not at the semi border, we had actually crossed the semi border. At that time, some of us could not travel to the airport, so we had to go use the underground route, get out of Nigeria to a neighboring country, fly out, then come back in that way. I managed to pass all the checkpoints until one last one before Badagry, before Abara, before we enter Lagos, so to speak. It was a joint checkpoint. All the security agencies were there. Surprisingly enough, it was not even the SSS that arrested me there. It was the NDLEA. They were searching our luggage, and I will bore you by giving the details of what. But basically, I was arrested there, then taken to 15A Awolowo Road, which was, as you know, the infamous detention headquarters annex of SSF. First, the headquarters. Then, when they moved to Abuja, it became the headquarters annex. Then, from there to Inter Center, this interrogation center, just the Koyi Cemetery, Balinde, and then finally from there to Ikoyi prison. Now, throughout, it was when I was with the SSS, it was solitary at first with my friends, Aki Adeshokon, who I've been arrested together with. I've been arrested together with in the same room. Then we were separated, and then I was freed, and then I was taken to our Ikoyi prison. So the experience was bad, but I have to say, because of the interest of the campaigns around all the people who were detained, political prisoners, being somebody who worked in human rights, being somebody who was automatically a prisoner of conscience, Amnesty, PEN International, I think we're giving honorary awards, making me a member of PEN, US, Canada, Germany. So there was a lot of attention. And because of that, I did not suffer what I would call brutalization in terms of physical torture, but in terms of the isolation, in terms of not being able to communicate with others, and then not being tried. And then inter center was really bad. Then Ikoyi prison, I wasn't in the cell for condemned prisoners, so that helped a bit, but we were cramped in the room where we were. These were awaiting trial, persons. So in general, because of the attention outside on my case and fellow pro-democracy and human rights campaigners, and in fact, I have to say, I didn't fall into the hands of the DMI, Directorate of Military Intelligence. Maybe that helps. But I remember that my experiences, in a way, mirror those of Baba Femi Ojudu, who we crossed paths at 15 Awolowo Road, at some point. But so in general, I survived it. I've actually done my memoirs more than halfway. I have to say that at this point, I'm very close to having to bring it out, because when I saw Baba Femi Ojudu's memoirs the other day, I said, okay, it's about time I also completed mine. Excerpts from it have actually been published in the Prison Writing from Africa that was edited by Jack Mapanje, New Writing for Africa, Granta, the British Council, and then the online journal, African Writer. So I think it's about time I brought out my own story so that it will be there for everybody, to read.
All right, thank you, Ogaga. Let's go to Oti. Oti, try again. Welcome to the show. Unmute yourself. Oti, go ahead. We still can't hear you. Let's go to Janaba. Janaba, you're next.
Good afternoon from here, Dr. Rudy and Dr. Ogaga. I think I pronounced it well. I heard you during the interview with Dr. Damages that more or less you endorse Tinubu for the 2023 election, and we're having an election coming on again soon. And your stand is based that we fought for democracy and all of that. So, and you talk about him being the governor of Lagos, and Peter Obi also was a governor of Anambra State. Among all these candidates are inspired to run now, which of them will you endorse for 2027?
I think we kind of answered it. Let me just put some things out there just to clarify. When I returned to Nigeria in 2014, I was driven by the sole notion that I cannot continue to turn my back on being an active participant in the political process, the way we did in 1999, and then ceded the terrain to those who were actually fighting for 4 more years for Abacha, that we had to be involved. Simply put, if we say there are no good people in government, then good people must participate, try to get into government. So, and then the question was, how do I do it? After we formed the Democratic Alternative with the leadership of the late Alao Akabasha, I couldn't get far because we had no money. The question becomes, how do you do it? If we're going to participate in the bourgeois democratic process, you have to go through a party that can actually get you there. It's inescapable unless you just want to participate as a fringe party, to like a kind of green party. But a green party can only work in a certain parliamentary system where within your own local unit, if you win, you get a seat in parliament. But to get a seat in parliament here, the cost of it and the structure of our presidential system makes it harder for you. So I thought the only way was to find a party where at least I have some people who I recognize from the pro-democracy movement, the likes of Tinubu himself, the likes of the former presidents of the National Association of Nigerian Students, Dr. Yemi Bamidele, were Uniben together. Benga Olaiko was PRO of NANS. And people like former governor of Ekiti State, Kayode Fayemi, then the likes of Rauf Aregbesola, and on and on and on. I say, these are people I know. These are people who used to be in the same room, or at least were involved in the same struggle with. And there were many more like them. Even the former secretary of the CLO and former president of NANS, Iman Eziazu, who unfortunately, died. Well, Ima Eziazu, we're not doing the student movement together, we were in the CLO together, was also in the APC. So I joined APC. So basically, I joined APC. Having joined APC, I'm a member of APC. So if I speak in favor of Tinubu, know where I'm coming from. I do not want to look as if I'm hiding that or keeping that from people. Full disclosure, I'm a member of APC and I've written about this. But beyond that is that I've also given my grounds for what I believe that among those who at least we know now, we know, for instance, that Tinubu will be a candidate. Who else is going to be a candidate? We don't know for sure, not even in the ADC. Only a few days ago, it was reported that the Niger Delta politicians or leaders and stakeholders have endorsed Amechi. And then the next moment, we saw that no, nothing like that had happened. We know that Obi is in ADC. We know that Atiku is in ADC. Who is going to emerge? We don't know. But whoever emerges, it will become a question for me at the end of the day, what they will do differently. I will have to be convinced that any of them, either as a party or as a candidate, has brought out a program that will be better than anything that Tinubu has done or can still do before I can change my mind. But as we speak, I don't think I have that program. I have that program yet. And as I was telling Rudolph, if you were paying attention then, if you are already logged on then, that I have had occasion at least twice to speak about this phenomenon of opposition to APC. And I know that the calling card of ADC is that Nigerians are suffering as a result of the policies of Tinubu. And I say, yes, nobody can argue that. There's suffering in the land, there's hunger in the land. But what has caused it? What has caused it is the twin policies of removal of subsidies from petroleum products and the floating of the naira rather than artificially propping it up. Even using ways and means, as we now know, that is printing money, literally printing money to prop the naira up, which is a sure route, a one-way route to endemic inflation, the type that you cannot recover from probably in a decade or 2 decades. So what will they do differently? Does that, meanwhile, mind you, Atiku and Obi had actually said they will remove subsidy. So if they were going to remove subsidy, now the current president has removed it. And this is the inevitable result. What are you going to do differently? We need to know that. And if you can articulate that, and then also not artificially prop up the Naira and get our economy producing, if you show us our program, and it is objectively, genuinely better than anything through an objective evaluation of what Tinubu has done or can do, then there's a basis for conversation. I might review my position, but as we speak, I have not seen it, and I don't think we're likely to see it, because if that program is there, it shouldn't be waiting till the eve of election before it comes out.
All right, thank you. Let's go to Oti again and see if we can hear him. Oti. No, you're muted. Unmute yourself.
I wonder what is wrong on his end.
Okay, Oti, today is not your day. KJ.
Right, I think you can hear me now. I'm using the phone. Right. Okay. Good evening, everyone. Right. Let me start with right. You talked about the colonial studies, right? That was
yes,
what we discussed.
Colonial studies. Yeah.
So I just want to know, is it correct to say it's a subfield of humanities? The humanities, I mean, it's a field.
It's humanities. Yeah, it's
right.
in the humanities.
So I'm just trying to understand what's because those anybody who is not, if like a member of the colonized peoples, an European, a Westerner, how would is colonial studies is something that can interest them? Do they have any role to play in that?
Absolutely. In fact,
what? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. Because every time you're talking about oppression, there's the oppressed and there's the oppressor.
Okay.
So and you can't adequately address the question if you're not addressing both the oppressor and the oppressed. It's like when Achebe was when this language of African writing, was really on, and it was like you had to have a stance. I remember one of the things Achebe said was that he needs to write in a language that addresses even the colonizer, which makes sense.
Right. It
also reminds me of the stance we had in the 80s when I was a member of a group called Women in Nigeria, WIM, who is a feminist group. I'm a feminist. And the idea was that what would men be doing in a feminist movement? But precisely, if men are the chief oppressors of women, if woman is the primal order to man, because that's the primal order, every ordering starts with woman. Even if you take the so-called Genesis story, it is Adam and Eve. And Adam automatically is saying, the woman you gave to me, gave me to eat, and, shifting blame on the woman. So woman, difference. The moment that's the primal difference that humanity have to grapple with. So you have to address man if you're going to successfully address the problems of the oppression of women as a feminist, male or female. So it's the same thing. The oppressor has to be addressed. And if you recall the preface of Jean-Paul Sartre to The Wretched of the Earth, that's precisely the point he was making, that Europeans are to examine themselves. They have to know that they are collaborators in the colonization, the misery, the domination, the atrocities that take place in the colonies. But because they are in the metropolis, they are not seeing how people are being battered in the streets. They are not seeing how people are being reduced to subhuman, deprived of the right to govern themselves. But they are taking the benefits of what comes from colonialism. So you have to make them understand that they are complicit in it, so that they can also put pressure on their governments, on those who believe in the theory of colonialism and imperialism and neocolonialism to end it. So it's a subject, okay. It's a field that addresses both the oppressor and the oppressed.
Okay, that makes sense to me. Sorry, let me just have another, Okay, you are an APC politician, is that correct?
Yeah, I said I'm a member of APC, that's what I said.
I see, okay. All right, so So that makes sense to me now, in the sense that we can't understand you to be, to be speaking the truth, telling the truth here. You're just talking as a politician, you're not, a truth speaker, as an academic, as a scholar, for example. Is that correct?
No, it's not correct. In the sense that not every scholar is speaking the truth either.
No. So what I mean is, hold on.
Let me address it. I understood your question. What I'm trying to say is this: you can't say just because someone is a scholar automatically he speaks the truth. You can't say because someone is a politician.
No. Okay. Let me. No. Hold on. But as a scholar, I think.
Oti, hold on. This is our guest, so he's not being interrogated. So if you
I don't mind.
I know you're a lawyer. So, but what I want to say, not just because of him, other people. If you ask a question, you expect a comment from him. Let him give you the comment, and you can follow up. Don't stop him as if you are interrogating him. I don't like that courtroom performances. All right, go ahead, Oti.
So what I'm trying to say is that let's not give those assumptions. I don't want anybody to assume that automatically speaks the truth. And I don't want to assume any other person automatically speaks the truth. I have to look at the specific claim they have made. I have to look at the specific argument they have made. That is then evaluate it. Look at the facts on which they have based their argument. If it is not correct, if the premise is wrong, then I point that out. But I cannot just say a priori that, oh, he's a politician, therefore he's a liar. They are good politicians. I can point out one for you. In the United States, for instance, there's a fellow called Bernie Sanders. He's a good politician. He speaks the truth, I think, most of the time. I'm not in his party. I've not met him in person. But when I relate what he says to the reality I know of America, I think he's speaking the truth. So for every position, every claim, there's a truth lurking somewhere there. That's what we have to try to find. And that's why when the answer I gave earlier on was that in terms of who to vote for in 2027, it's not just a matter of because I'm APC. So that everything I say now is a lie. It's not the truth. But whoever is going to emerge, we have to look at whatever program, policies they have, and then examine that policy against the policy that the current President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has. The actions he has already taken, ranging from the old subsidy removal, the floating of the currency, the local government autonomy, the continuation of devolution by way of power generation, removing it from the exclusive legislative list to the states, going now to his argument for his plea to the National Assembly to now make a law enabling state police, which is something we've been campaigning for a long time. All these are things that are facts, that are things he's doing. So if a government is going to come, I want to know, what will they do as opposition? If they give me a program that promises to do better and on an objective basis, I can see that, yes, it will do better. Then, of course, you can come back to me and say, why am I not agreeing, changing my mind to follow this more persuasive, coherent, believable, and actionable program? Is it because you're a member of APC? That is when you can hold me on the level of partisanship, say, I'm refusing to accept the truth simply because I'm a member of a party. But until that moment, you cannot just simply say, oh, you're a member of a party, you're a liar. Nobody, you're not even a pastor. I won't even grant a pastor an automatic claim to truth-telling simply because he or she is a pastor.
All right, Oti, thank you. Let's get to other people. If we have time, we'll come back to you. That's why I always say get their best questions so that we don't have to. All right, let's go to KJ. KJ, you're next.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Rudolph, again for bringing a very wonderful guest for us. Dr. Ogaga, I want to appreciate you. I have listened so very much to what you've said, and I've tried to follow your the trend of thought which you are putting forward. I must also confess that I totally agree with you to a large extent. My first degree is on theater arts, and the second one is on media arts. So I agree with your trend. In fact, I see you. I know I read some of your writings when I was growing up. I see you as one of those, the real hand we needed, you know, in the subjects that we taught. I mean, on trying to mold the society, our understanding, our mentality, and pointing the way forward to which is what the literary work is all about. I also kind of lean towards again what Pa Ikide has said. Pa Ikide I also know, and I want to ask you this, and why I'm just touching on all this is just to glean to the point where I'm going now. We used to think that when our work is reviewed or when we publish, we are pointing the society. Look, like some of Wole Soyinka's works, and that's why I said I tend to agree with Pastor Ikide, Pastor Ikide. We are pointing, we are like the mirror, we are showing you where it should and where things are not getting right and all that. And if our work, your work, which is quite, you know, elaborate, is not able to move, that's where I'm going to pass by Ikide's question. It's not able to move the ordinary or the people who are consuming it to a point where there can be a change. We read the likes of Olarotunmi, the likes of Wole Soyinka, and all that time, those people in that grade. And yet we see ourselves where we are now, not even able to appreciate who should be a right person to rule our communities or to run government or to be in positions of the judiciary and all that. Do you think, that's my question, that the literary work that we have engaged in?
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much.
Think that the literary work that you have spent your life in, and many of us have spent our life trying to bring to the fore, has been able to achieve its purpose?
Yeah, well, what is the purpose of a literary work?
That's what I'm saying.
Work is not, the purpose of a literary work is not like, even as a manifesto. Not even the Communist Manifesto brought a revolution to be. The Karl Marx and Engels' the Communist Manifesto bring about a revolution? No. It requires people actually being moved, organizing people, forming revolutionary vanguards, a group of people together, all Castro and Che Guevara and the group, actually coming out. They may be moved by the ideas, inspired by the ideas, but the ideas themselves, as expressed in the Communist Manifesto, or any number of the writings of Marx and Engels and the communists or the Marxists, the ideas themselves did not cause a revolution. It takes active participation. So the same thing with the literary work, and which in the first place, the literary work is not even holding itself out as a revolutionary tract, a guide to action. Not even the wretched of the earth has achieved that status. You may read it to be informed, to be clearer about your oppression, about your condition, and about what you might be able to do about it. But left on its own, it cannot do the work. As a matter of fact, that is just only an aspect of the participation of Frantz Fanon in the Algerian Revolution. The writing part, the theorizing part, the clarification part. It's like you go to church and the pastor preaches a sermon. The sermon itself is not going to bring about the change. It is the active, intentional doing of what needs to be done and the coming together of similarly minded persons who believe that they have to form a group to agitate, to canvass for, to contest the space of power that will bring about the change. So I've said in writings before that every writer has to be involved. And Ngugi wa Thiong'o are a perfect example of that on the African continent, whose so many books, Writers in Power, Battle of a Pen, and so on. You can't be more revolutionary than Ngugi wa Thiong'o, God rest his soul, the ancestors now. Never also left it to the idea that one book or any number of books is going to bring about a revolution. The trouble, however, is that we will never know how many people have been influenced. We will never know. I just mentioned earlier that reading the thoughts of Noam Chomsky about how he had his nose to vote for Bill Clinton, to explain that it is wrong for people to always think that there's no difference between the Democrats and Republicans and therefore not participate. Because there is some difference. It may not be major. Noam Chomsky, as you know famously, is an anarchist. Anarchists don't even believe in government. They believe in self-governance. But yet he voted for Clinton. He had enough reason to vote for Clinton. that however minor you might think that change is, it matters to some people's lives. So that is exactly what I'm saying. You must take action. No writing, however revolutionary, however burning with Marxist, incendiary force, is going to change until people organize, influenced, motivated, driven by the ideas, then organize people to move into a movement. That's what we call them, a movement, to move towards that change. That is the only time. So we can't say literature fails because it's not achieving the goal of immediate change in the society. It can't do that. That's not his role.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, KJ. Let's go to Imperial Apologist.
Sorry, I don't have any major question for you. Just I just wanted to know what aspect of literary writing you do, and I wasn't here at the beginning, and what kind of works you have published. That's basically why I'm here.
Well, I have mostly poetry. I'm a poet, mostly. I've published 5 books of poetry, and the 6th one is coming out this very month. I've also published scholarly work, which was my dissertation at Cornell University, which is what is being displayed now, History, Trauma, and Healing, Post-Colonial Narratives, published by Palgrave Macmillan, New York. Then I also do newspaper writing. I've written a column, I've written for the newspapers ever since I was a law student at the University of Benin. So those are my main areas. I would say the essay, poetry, and scholarly work. So I would say those are the 3 genres in which I write.
Okay, that's all.
All right, thank you. Let's go to CM.
Okay, thank you, Rudolph. Good evening from here. Good evening, our guest, Professor Ogaga Ifowodo.
Dr. Ogaga Ifowodo.
Oh, okay. Oh, well, sorry. Well,
I did teach at the university, but I didn't wait to be a full professor before I returned to Nigeria.
Okay. Don't worry. I know you remember your days with Professor Grace Alele Williams at Uniben, but that is by the way. You're running.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Can't possibly forget that.
Ogaga, you see, I've read your articles in the papers, and I know when you wanted to want to go to House of Reps to represent the Isoko community. I think I read about it. I don't know how you went. Maybe they told you that poetry, Nigerian politics is different from your poetry and student activism. That's by the way.
I don't have money. Simple. That's all. I don't have money. That's what it told me.
Well, that is part of the Nigerian politics. The question I want to ask you, because I feel somebody in your position should be able to articulate better. You're a member of APC. You've said it now. Can you please articulate for me or for anybody what Tinubu, as the president of Nigeria, has achieved since 2023 in the areas of security, economy, and then what the other one? Security, economy, and probably human rights. Given the fact that from where he met the situation and what he has been able to do to make, to leave an impression on the life of everyday Nigerian in this area, security, economy. I think the other one should be human rights also. I can't be something like that. So if you can help us.
Okay. Human rights is easy because ever since 1999, when we returned to civilian governance, that big problem of violation of human rights has mostly receded. That does not mean there have been no violations of human rights. That's not the point I'm making. And people will probably point to NSARS as probably the big moment when rights were violated. But compared to when we were under the military and we were in the human rights and pro-democracy movement, when we had decrees that prevented or challenging any action done, prevented detention decrees and so on, we don't have that. So automatically the terrain for human rights is vastly improved. And I would say that's what will depend on Tinubu alone. It's just by the sheer change from military dictatorship to civilian governance and the fact that our constitution, to whatever extent, we are able to at least implement it, and there's no decree prohibiting the review of any action by government. You will also know that only recently now, the former governor of the central bank, Emefiele, was released. Why? Because the court said you cannot hold somebody in preventive detention without bringing charges forever. So there has to be an end to obfuscation, and it's released. That is the beauty of democracy. Now, there may be instances where you say, oh, so person has been detained without charge. You can bring those instances up and review them one by one. But in general, in terms of the climate, I think we're in a better period. Then, what he has achieved in the economy. I don't know when you joined us, but I've actually more or less covered that ground when I was bringing out the grounds for my still standing by him, not only as a member of APC, but as somebody who has good reason, who has laid out those reasons before why I supported him. I wrote a series of articles on why I supported him, so my position is very clear. Then between then and now, the things he has done, I said the one thing that people rake him over the coals for is that there's suffering, there's hunger, and nobody can deny that. But what caused it is what he did by removing subsidy on oil products and then floated the naira so that we will no longer be artificially propping up the value of the naira, up to the point of what they call in euphemism, Ways and Means Committee, which simply means printing money to support the naira. And you know, when you start doing that, that is the beginning of the end of your economy. We have come, and because he did these two things, one, there's some stability around the currency. Investors can plan and make long-term plans, knowing that first of all, they can access foreign currency, and two, the value is not artificially propped up. So there's certainty there. And you can see, I'm not in government, so I can't give you official figures. But from what we read in the press, there's a higher inflow of forex. There's a higher confidence in the Nigerian economy, more direct investment in the Nigerian economy. That's only one part. Then the other part is that the removal of the oil subsidy has meant that massive amounts of money that are being used to subsidize petrol prices, diesel and other petroleum products. So that we were happily going to the pump and paying 120, 190, for a liter. Now it's in the neighborhood of 900, 800, 900. Yes, but then all that money has been freed. And because we are now refining more in Nigeria, thankfully, because of Dangote's refinery, the pressure on the dollar has reduced to a large extent. It has not manifested itself in the day-to-day ordinary life as much as we would want, but one way of this we know is that states are no longer going to Abuja to beg for money to pay salaries. You all know that Okonjo-Iweala, a former minister of finance under Obasanjo, famously lamented the fact that we were borrowing money to pay salaries. We're no longer doing that. So there's some stability in the economy. Investor confidence is there. The Nigerian Stock Exchange is rising, but the results have not trickled down fast enough. But how long should it take? It's only 2 years in governance. And when you meet certain problems which are dysfunctional, an economy that is dysfunctional, they are structural. When you're correcting them, you can't expect immediate results. Not even any of them in the opposition parties will say that if they come into power today, then the next day, automatically, everybody will be having a good life. They all said, Atiku, Obi, and Tinubu, that they will remove the subsidy. So that's not the question anymore, that they will have removed it. And it's also not debatable that once you removed it, the expected increase in petroleum prices will be there. They probably will tell us that they will have had a better plan to deal with that. We don't know that plan. They're not the government. But I've been challenging them. Okay, now that you are angry to come back and using that very same thing, the results of the removal of the subsidy to whip the government in power, say they're suffering. What will you do differently? Are you therefore saying that if you came to power in 2027, you will return us to the regime of subsidizing petroleum products? You will return us to the regime of artificially propping up the naira, having multiple exchange windows, and then leading to arbitrage, creating multi-billionaires out of our suffering through subsidy and dropping all the naira. So we need to know these things. So, and then you talk about other things. In nation building, I said, Tinubu has done a few things that are not in the news all the time. Local government autonomy. The local government is the third tier of governance. That is what closest to the people. But what they were was that they were subjected to the states. The states just simply creamed off their allocations and treated it as a slush fund for doing all kinds of things, but not development. Now, local government autonomy, by a daring act of even going to the Supreme Court, has been instituted on Tinubu. It's our business now to hold the local government chairmen, their feet to the fire, and make them accountable. Same thing for the vast amounts of money that the state governments are not getting because of the increased inflow into the federation account. We should hold them, their feet to the fire. So those are some of the things that Tinubu has done within the short space of 2 years. Now, I've said it, I don't know if you had logged on or you have joined us then, that I'm dying to know what the opposition will do differently. Security. This is a problem that cannot be tackled by any one government. Nowhere where this Islamic terrorist activity is going on has it been possible for one state to tackle it alone. We have a police, one central police, that's trying to police the whole nation. We have everything is centralized, but the forests are within states, within local governments, in some backwoods. So you now understand the two things that Tinubu has, which I actually haven't mentioned: forest rangers that have now been constituted, who will police our forests and actually be armed, not just club wielding forest rangers, armed forest rangers, currently undergoing training as part of the way, to meet the insurgency and the hiding places of the terrorists in the forest. And now the question of state police, which he is asking the National Assembly to expedite action on to bring about. So that is that. Then, of course, the collaboration with the US. People say that Tinubu was forced into it because Donald Trump, in his usual way, mostly for himself, the interest of self-interest and for America, but still, claiming to be the hero of Christianity, whereas the man is not a Christian, said he was going to bomb the hell out of terrorists in Nigeria and more or less gave an ultimatum. But to whatever extent, conversations started, dialogue started, and there's a cooperation between the United States and Nigeria as we speak towards a more effective way of dealing with the terrorist threat in Nigeria. But these are some of the things. I am not in government. I'm not privy to official information, so I cannot give you any answers beyond what I know is in the public and my own evaluation of that.
All right. Thank you, CM. Let's go to Ndubisi.
Sorry, Rudolph. Just to clear a bit of something. Obi said, in terms of subsidy, that he will remove the corruption to know what is actually being subsidized. Obi mentioned that. He said there's corruption in the system. You have to take away the corruption first to know what you are subsidizing. Then on security, Ogaga, we would like you to take this home. If you are the commander-in-chief like Tinubu and your national security advisor is arming terrorists or bandits and calling them vigilante, what will you do? Because that goes to the heart of security. The problem Tinubu is having.
I will sack him and try him.
Yeah, thank you. But at least I remember.
I'm asking a rhetorical question. You haven't said that his national security advisor is doing so. His national security advisor is Ribadu. You have not said he is doing so. But I'm saying if there's a national security advisor who does that, I will sack him from the president and I will try him.
He admitted. He said when he was confronted that what happened in Ilori. Yeah, Ribadu said that they are vigilante. He was the person. He said he admitted giving them arms, that they are vigilante or so.
Wait. Hold on a moment. Vigilantes is a different thing. Like auxiliary, local policing efforts in the absence of state police that work with those who are on the side of the government against terrorists. So if they arm them, because even the vigilantes have always been begging to be armed, that their work is hampered by the fact that they are not armed. Now, I don't know I don't know that he actually said we armed vigilantes to work with terrorists.
No, it was when the thing came to light. It was when the thing came to light. He now said, no, they are not terrorists, that they are vigilante, because the government of Kwara State said these are the bandits, the terrorists causing mayhem, that they were given the arms by the NSA. So when Ribadu was confronted, he said, no, they are vigilante or something like that, denying it.
Okay, so basically, it's a question of bad cop, if you like a rogue police officer who lends his arms to terrorists or who uses his arms to commit armed robbery. But that's not as if it's a policy of the government that they are consciously arming vigilantes to go and work for terrorists. He was only saying, we gave arms, if I believe you, I'm relying on what he said, we gave arms to vigilantes, not to terrorists. But if they've used them for terrorist activities, then they should be charged, they should be brought to court. They should be made to face the brunt of the law. That's all.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, CM.
Thank you.
Ndubisi, go ahead.
Yes, Rudolph. Good afternoon from here. Dr. Gaga, good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, my brother.
Yes. I want to take my question from two sides. I admire strongly your literary and legal knowledge and all that you've done in the pro-democracy struggle. I've not read I've not read your books, but from what you've said, I'm sure they are all there for the public to see. In that light, knowing what is going on in our country today since the return to democracy in 1999, I don't know whether in good conscience you'll be able to say that some of these your comrades in the pro-democracy struggle, like the man in power now, knowing what people are saying across the country in his leadership of the country today, whether in good conscience you will say he has stood up to the ideals of that era of the struggle to kick out the military and to give hope to Nigerians. Secondly, sir, I'm not done, sir. Let me have one more question, because I don't want to start going to the area of security and all that. I just want to put all into perspective. Secondly, sir, since he came to power, you saw the way he rushes whatever policy he wants to push that should go to National Assembly. You saw the way he rushes them and gets them across with his men at the National Assembly. But it appears, and not necessarily it appears, it is obvious that whatever is in the best interest of the masses, what people are asking for, he drags his feet, or sometimes he abandons it. He doesn't, he appears to, he's now on the throne. He appears to jettison those things he used to say then, that Nigeria should be restructured. He talks about it strongly, even as a governor of Lagos State. Now he's in power. There are some things he could push through for true federalism. He's not doing it. I don't want to even to go. I want to go to the area of how he spends our money, how some members of his family are just there feasting on the country's wealth and all that. For somebody who you support, because I'm sure you still support him, are you not concerned, and in true conscience, are you going to say he's doing well? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Again, I think I've covered this ground before, and I don't know at what point you joined us.
I joined from the beginning.
No, but I've covered this ground when I was when it was just between me and the host Rudolph, and then when I was responding to Ikide's question, and then when I was responding to was it a KJ? You know, so I've actually covered the ground quite a bit. However, I don't mind repeating myself. Here is a thing. Governance is a different kettle of fish from activism. I've learned it myself, even without having got to power, just by merely participating in the electoral process. That I wanted to represent my federal constituency, the Isoko people, at the House of Reps. I've learned it, that governance and activism are two different things. When I became a member of the board of NDC representing Delta State, it's a board membership thing. It's not an executive position. But if I tell you what people expected of me, just a board membership, just to meet 4 times a year, to review policy, do oversight, then inspect projects, what people were expecting of me, you will be shocked. And these are things that people confront when they're in power. I'd like to remind you, even the great Nelson Mandela, believe it or not, was called a traitor when he got to power. They said he had sold out to the whites. That's the great Nelson Mandela. And you have to admit that you have to learn to make the transition from being a liberation fighter to being a governor, a president of a whole country. So there are things we promise or there are things we do as activists that because we're activists, we're not immediately seeking power. We're just articulating that which is for the public good, the general good, the kind of things we did in the pro-democracy movement, which is why we were not ready in 1999 when the time had come for power to be taken. We had done all the work, we had fought the battles, we had gone to prison and come back, some had died. But when it came to the time of power, we were not ready. And those who knew the game of power then took over, even though they were the ones fighting for 4 more years, many of them at any rate, for Abacha. So what am I trying to say here? In every activist movement, you have what I would call the aspirational goals: good society, rule of law, equality, gender equality, good roads, health insurance, social security. Those are aspirational. When you become president, it does not mean automatically you can press a button and all those things will happen. You are going to make them come to be within the constraints of the resources you have available. And not only that, the clashing claims by the various groups, societies, interests. You have to find a way to do all of that. Meanwhile, the resources are limited. So when they don't deliver immediately on some of those results, we'll automatically say, oh, they have failed. But if you notice, if you study all of them, even the most progressive, none of them is ever able to implement maximally what they promised. What you want to then know is that, are they actually doing enough to do what they said they would do? So to answer the question, to go back to what I've recited earlier, Tinubu said, I will do X, Y, Z. So the question you should be asking is that, he said he will do this and do that. He hasn't done it. Then we know where he is at the moment. So in the absence of specific questions as to what he said he would do and he has not done, or what he has now done, but which is producing the wrong result, then there's no way to just keep going rhetorically. Then as to whether his family members are feasting on the wealth of the nation, I can't speak to that because I don't have a specific claim that so member of the family. If you have to let us know. You have to tell us here now that so member of his family did so and so, got access to so amount of money, misappropriated it. Yes, then we can respond to that, because otherwise, because mind you, apart from being a lawyer, even as a citizen, you don't want to be falsely accused, right? If I say you stole something, the next thing you're going to ask, what did I steal? From who? Who is the complainant? Definitely, those are legitimate questions. So I can't. But if you're speaking generally, that the level of corruption, there's still corruption in the government. Yes, that's a general question. But if you're making specific claims, allegations, I'm afraid I cannot respond to it unless you make the details of that claim clearer to not only me, but to all those who are listening. Because, as you know, many people are listening, so that is where it is. So yes, can I still stand by him? I'm saying, I read a number of things earlier: local government autonomy, removal of power, which is a major problem, as you know, in Nigeria, from the exclusive legislative list and putting it to the states. Then continuation of the power generation that came from the previous government, but he has continued with it, asking for state police now as a necessity, an imperative now, training and arming forest rangers so that they can help police more effectively police our forests and those hidden places where terrorists launch their attacks from. These are all things he's doing, among other things. I didn't even mention the students' loan thing, the students' loan fund, which is something that has not been done before, that is now being done. So there are a number of things. But if you want to point to any specific one and say, this has not been done, or this has been done badly, then we can have a conversation on that. So that is the reason why I still stand by him. And I would like to know what any opposition politician thinks can be done differently or better, articulated for us to see, so that we can, on a more objective basis, compare the two and know who is standing by the way, the truth that will lead us forward, and who is just merely being partisan or merely just making general accusations. That will be my response. But I understand where your question is coming from, because we're all in a hurry to have Nigeria develop. We're all in a hurry to have good governance that works for everybody in Nigeria. That is where that comes from. The same thing I said about Ikide, that I know where that comes from. It wants change faster than we are having. It wants accountability faster than we are having. But that should not therefore blind us to the things that we have now that may be good. Like Tai Sholari used to say, if the devil gives me free education, I will take it. So even if you don't like President Bola Tinubu, if he has brought students loan fund, if he has done local government autonomy, if he has brought power generation to the states, if he's asking for state police now, you can't tell me these are things that we as progressives do not want in Nigeria. So if there's something more you want, we can still discuss that. So that's will be my response to you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Ndobisi. Yakubu, you're the final person we have before I ask my final question, and then we'll call it a day. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Rudolph. Thank you, Dr. Ogaga, for your, for being here today, and also for your statements and speech so far. Actually, I came on as soon as I heard you talk about the local government autonomy, because I am a proponent of local government autonomy. I have always been a proponent of local government autonomy, because that is where the governance is missing, and that is where the governance is needed most. The majority of the population in Nigeria here resided in the local government areas, in the villages. And you discover that the lack of presence of government is largely felt in the local government areas, in the villages. In other words, the roads, the hospitals, the schools, the silos, the transports for farm produce and all that. All that is needed, even the insecurity. Now, I was listening to you talk about state police. What about local government police? Is that too early to ask for? Because I mentioned this. I mentioned this because I was looking at a scenario of a family where you have one person that is trained as a first aider, and then someone in that family suffers a heart attack. You realize that the chances of that person surviving is higher, because already there is someone within that unit that is trained to respond to such an emergency before the person goes to whatever level the person needs to get to. That is the way I see local government police as. It's like the first responder, the emergency response, before the support comes from the state, and then the other support comes from the federal. Do you think it's too early to start asking for local government police? And sorry, another one again is, what do you think about Section 7.1 and Section 197.1b of the 1999 Constitution amended, the one that has to do with moving the local government issues from concurrent list to the exclusive legislative list, and also stopping states' independent electoral commission from conducting local government elections and giving it to INEC? We are trying to see that this autonomy thing is as practical as possible. In other words, there's no interference whatsoever, so that the people can actually, whatever it is that is coming now in large chunk can be felt, the true governance, which is the true reason why this government is making all these moves, will be felt by the people. Because it's now or never. It's now or never. We have to get it right now.
First of all, I'm happy that you are a proponent of local government autonomy. I don't know anybody who will not support local government autonomy, unless that person it doesn't even know what government is about, and it's not be paying attention to anything. It's a third tier of government. It's where the people are, and it's crucial, And so, yes, it's a big deal that Tinubu was willing to even go as far as force the issue, take to the Supreme Court, and get the Supreme Court, to rule in favor of local government autonomy. There are many people who feel that it's not the best way to do it, but at least it's done that, and we have local government autonomy. There are also people who believe that, properly speaking, local governments should be under states. States should create as many local governments as they want. Because one of the big problems we have in Nigeria, which is part of our big problem of restructuring, is that because the local governments are direct units of federal allocation, some states have too many of them, and they can't really justify it, even if they say just by population. But that shouldn't be the only reason, for local governments, because if they are really self-sustaining, they should have the resources to sustain them. The same way we argue for states. If you want a state, let the state be viable. Have the resources to actually run your state, because you are supposed to even be contributing only a part of your, income to the federal, not the other way around. Federal dishing out money to you in the states. So yes, all these issues are there. At the end of the day, you might find that if it's subjected to scrutiny, to debate, you have good arguments on both sides. Still, I lean in favor of autonomy. I don't care at this point how it came about. Local government autonomy is what we need. That said, I don't think it's an issue whether it should be exclusive. It's not one of the things I see when actually on the exclusive legislative list. Local government is an arm of government. So that is not what is on the exclusive legislative list. It is the things that can be done, the areas of policy, of development, developmental policy, things like generation of power, ownership of mineral resources, ownership of so many other things, and railways, and so on and so forth. Those are the things we're actually talking about, And in these things, Tinubu has begun to quietly, because sometimes it is better to use that way. You know that when we insist on the Sovereign National Conference, I mentioned this earlier, you probably were in this in 1999, when we're insisting on the Sovereign National Conference as the only condition for us to move forward, the result is when we didn't get it, we turned our backs. And those who were fighting for 4 more years of Abacha came and took over the terrain. But if we had stayed on, for instance, flush with the popularity we had gained, from the pro-democracy struggle, maybe not all of us may have got it, but a sizable number of us probably may have got in if we agreed to participate through even the existing parties then, which were new. If we had joined them, the likes of Bola Ige, when they were forming the PDP, Bola Ige, somebody I can sit in the same room, who I know, who when I was coming to the US to study, told me, Ogaga, go, give me 25,000 naira in those days. Say, go, you are young, go and see postgraduates and come back. We could have joined them, joined hands with them. We may have even been able to transform their platforms radically and achieve more from 1999, but we didn't. So basically what I'm saying here is that we've got local government autonomy. It's not one of those things on the exclusive legislative list. So forget about that. The things we're actually worried about, like the electoral process, bringing integrity to our electoral process, making sure that our results count. Those are important things. And then if you want to ask me, we have covered that ground about what the National Assembly has done. Beyond that is, was the removal of subsidy and the float of the Naira, are they good things for our economy? If so, how and why? And how has Tinubu done with those things? Is there more that can be done? We can debate all of those things. So rest assured that we're not at the risk of local governments being subjected to the states again. Because that's the worst that could be done, not exclusive legislative list, but that they be subjected to the states again. Because we now have a Supreme Court decision on that, and local government autonomy has come. And now money is going to them, even more money for that matter than before. So the onus is on us now, the people in the local government, to make the local government chairmen, the councillors, accountable. That because this is where the problem is: accountability. Making our governors, those who the federal executive, the state executive council, the local governments, and then even the federal accountable. That is where we need to have citizen action, citizen participation to deepen our democracy. That's why we have to have more people like you actually come out and run for office at the local government level. There was a time when I entertained the idea of running for chairman of my local government. I actually did entertain that idea, because I say it's closest to the people. So let's focus our attention on the areas that matter. Let's pay close enough attention to know what the real issue is, rather than generalizations, because there's a big danger in generalizations. Okay, governments are corrupt, therefore anything government does is bad, especially if the person who is in power at that point is not somebody with support. I can hate a person for any reason, but like I said earlier when I mentioned the tax reliance dictum that the devil gives me free education, I will take it. We should still look at what they are actually doing. Put aside our sentiment, but what we feel about that person, because there's something you're going to do. He's in power. You can't remove him. So pay attention to what he is doing now. And if that is not enough for you, then pay attention to how you can successfully remove him. If that's your plan. Say, I don't like this president. I have a president somebody who's going to do better, who is going to return subsidies, for example, who is going to float the naira again, and then will live better. If that's your plan, work for it. But at any rate, be active. But as for this present, I think President Tinubu has done enough within these 2 years, and did enough in the pro-democracy struggle, did enough when he was governor of Lagos State for me to have more confidence in him than any of the people who are challenging him now, who have not yet given me a program that will be radically different from his program for me to back them.
All right, Yakubu, thank you so much. Ogaga, that was
Thank you
so much for hanging out with us this Sunday. It's been over 3 hours, and this is my final question for you, and then you can sum up your thoughts. Listen to you, it makes me wonder what you think about Omoyele Sowore. I'm sure you know him, he's your friend.
Very good friend.
What do you think about him and his political activities in Nigeria?
He's my friend, as you know, and we're in the student movement, together. We are products of the same epoch of student movement when we had a real student movement, the National Association of Nigerian Students. What he's doing is good for any society, but I worry that the methods that he uses tend to alienate more than to bring people together. If you want change, I think adopting a position or at least a platform and an attitude that is more likely to win people to your sides, is better if you're going to be in the political process. But if you're a revolutionary movement, like a revolutionary vanguard that is going to, through revolutionary activity, bring about change, that's a different thing. So I guess what I'm saying now is that I'm not quite sure where to put his activities at the moment as a revolutionary vanguard that, in the manner of Fidel Castro, Che Guevara, they're going to launch a revolution and take over the government, or as a radical political party, AAU, that is AAU or AAC, I think. I think I'm mixing it up.
AAC.
AAC, sorry, not AAU. I'm thinking of AAC. That is going to operate through the bourgeois democratic system. Now, I talked about that earlier. And its peculiar constraints and demands and the place of money in it. Is it a party that wants to use that process to get to power? In other words, maybe transition effortlessly from being a revolutionary movement to a political party that will participate in elections and hope to win. These two things, I think, require different parameters for getting to power. And I think that is the place where I worry most about how the laudable aims of radical change that he wants can come about. Otherwise, in terms of what he wants, the aspirational part of his work, every freedom-loving, liberation-loving, good governance-loving person will love them. But it's a question of the methodology, the means. Is it a revolutionary vanguard or a political party? I think that's where I'm not too clear yet on what his planned route to power is.
All right. Thank you so much today. Any final thoughts, or we round it up?
Well, I think my thoughts are that we should all be engaged, and we should not be too quick to use sentiments or thoroughly examined presuppositions to allow us judge governments and those in power too harshly, instead of subjecting whatever they are doing, each of the activities, to scrutiny, and therefore knowing what is wrong and what needs to be corrected. I say this because sometimes perception trumps reason, and people can run very far with a mere perception rather than the actuality of what is going on. So let's pay close attention. And by any means, if we are proposing alternatives, let's also be very clear about how those alternatives will be far better for our country than what we currently have. Then if we form the basis of civil discussions that can help us articulate a way forward from the present.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Ogaga Ifowodo, for being with us today. We really appreciate the time you spent. And next time we call on you, we'll continue the conversation. We appreciate that. Thank you.
I'll be glad to be back, and thank all the participants, for the very engaged and spirited discussion of our topics today.
And when your book comes out, let us know the book, Why Does God Need a Gun? When it comes out, let me know. We will bring you back and you can explain to us why.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. Every writer wants to plug their work, so I'm glad to be back here.
All right. Thank you. We'll take a quick break and then we'll close the show.
Uncle, right? I have the right to address you.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Yeah, we're done with you. We're done. Thank you, everybody, for being here. We appreciate all of you, and we're just here to round up. I thank you, Ndubisi, for being here. Ify, you came in late. There's nothing I can do anymore. Did you watch? Did you not watch? Okay. All right. So for those who may want to continue the conversation, there will be a show after this where KJ will now take your feedback, and then we can discuss further some of the issues we talked about. But we had Dr. Ogaga Ifowodo talking about Biodun Jeyifo and literature and the Nigerian election coming up in a few months. And next week, Sunday, we are going to bring you another guest, an important voice in the conversation on Nigeria. I haven't narrowed down on the person, but I will let you guys know when I do that. Yeah.
So, Doctor, there was time we exchanged a WhatsApp message. I don't know if it was last year or 2024 about trying to get Majid Dahiru.
I'm in touch with him, but we've not agreed. And there was a time he said he was traveling. I'm trying to.
Yeah,
sometimes
he appears on Nigeria Info Hard every Wednesday. So I don't know whether you have colleagues there.
I have his email. I have his number.
I have his number too, but sometimes when I call, it doesn't pick, and I don't know. He's a very strong voice and a very neutral one for that matter.
All right.
Even this crisis now, this recent conflict in the Middle East, he has some historical stuff to say about that. Yeah. Meanwhile, your guest today, No,
we're not analyzing it now. You have to wait for KJ to do that. Yeah.
I hope you will be on that show, on the KJ's show.
Oh, okay. You need me to be there.
Yeah, I have some things to say about that.
Okay, Ify.
When are you bringing back cocaine?
Thank you for saying this. I'll cut this off and send it to him because I've been telling him that people are looking for him.
You better come back here.
Okay, all right.
And Paikedia as well. Paikede.
Okay.
Yeah, Paikede.
These are your favorite people. All right. Thank you all, everybody. Okay. Thank you. Let me just say thank you to people who supported us. We're here because of them. Brick House Capital, thank you so much. Kulata, thank you. And T Majek, thank you so much for your support. All right. CM, you wanted to say something?
No. Sorry. I have to.
We are still live. So.
Okay. We're still live.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Let me just go off, and then you can do your thing.
No, I thought anyway, sorry.
KJ will be on in few. I think maybe maybe a few minutes. All right. Okay. So thank you, everybody. I appreciate all of you. I will see you next Saturday on another edition of Have Your Say 247.
Okay.
Bye, Papu Doka.
Okay. Bye.
Okay.
Tó fẹ́ kú torí ẹ̀ o.
Ọwọ́ ẹni ló ti ṣàánú kọ́. Ayé la bá, ayé la fi sílẹ̀ sí. Ọ̀nà èèyàn.
Thank you so much for watching. Thank you. Have you subscribed? Yes, you. Have you subscribed? You. Yeah, before you go, click. It's free. Click. Just that's it. Have you subscribed? You're laughing. Have you subscribed? Have you subscribed? Thank you. Hey, madam. Thank you so much. I can see you. We have to get to 100,000 subscribers. By the end of the year, how are we going to do that if you don't subscribe? Yes, you. Yes, you're about to click off. Why? Have you subscribed? It's free. If you don't, ask your son, ask your daughter how to. Just one click. Thank you. I see you. Aha. Thank you very much. I'll see you tomorrow.